Hello and welcome to Beyond Earth. I'm really glad you found your way here, settling into this quiet moment we're about to share together. There's something deeply comforting about pausing at the end of a long day, letting the weight of the world settle around us like a familiar blanket, and allowing our minds to drift toward questions that have no easy answers. I'm so glad you're here, ready to embark on this gentle journey through time and possibility. Tonight, we're going to explore something extraordinary together, a vision of our planet that never was, yet might have been. We'll walk through the corridors of deep time, imagining Earth as it could have existed without the one element that shapes every breath we take, every heartbeat that sustains us, every green leaf that reaches toward the sun. We're going to envision a world that never knew the gentle caress of rain, never felt the rhythm of tides pulling at its shores, never witnessed the miracle of life emerging from primordial pools. Close your eyes for a moment and picture our blue marble as we know it today, 71% of its surface covered in shimmering oceans, white clouds swirling through the atmosphere like brushstrokes on an infinite canvas, rivers carving their ancient pathways through continents, and countless droplets of morning dew catching the first light of dawn. Now, let that image slowly fade, and in its place, imagine something entirely different. Oh, and if you're enjoying these stories, I'd really appreciate a like or subscribe. Super curious where you're all listening from, so drop a comment with your location and what time it is there. Alright, let's head back to this extraordinary thought experiment. What emerges in this waterless vision is a planet both alien and familiar, a world where the fundamental forces that shaped our reality took entirely different paths. This is Earth as it might have been, not the Earth of flowing streams and crashing waves, but a world governed by fire and stone, by winds that carry not moisture but the whispers of different possibilities. It's a planet where the story of existence itself would have been written in an entirely different language, one spelled out in crystals and metals, in the slow dance of tectonic forces, and in the patient accumulation of cosmic dust across eons of time. In our world, water has been the great architect, the invisible hand that shaped mountains and valleys, that carried nutrients across vast distances, that provided the medium in which the first stirrings of life could take their tentative steps toward complexity. Without water, our planet would have become something else entirely, perhaps more like Venus, shrouded in a thick atmosphere of carbon dioxide and sulfur compounds, or perhaps more like Mars, a cold and dusty world where the only changes come from the gradual reshaping of sand dunes by relentless winds. But let us imagine something more nuanced, more interesting than these simple comparisons. Let us envision an Earth that found its own unique path through the cosmos, a world that developed its own forms of beauty, its own patterns of change, its own ways of telling the story of time's passage. Without the erosive power of water to wear down mountains, our planet's surface would rise higher and higher, creating peaks that dwarf our current tallest summits. The Himalayas, the Andes, the Rocky Mountains, all would be mere foothills compared to the towering spires that would reach towards space on a waterless world. The atmosphere of this alternate Earth would be a thing of wonder and terror, thick with gases that we can barely imagine, perhaps rich in noble elements that remain trapped in our current atmosphere by water's hydrogen bonds. Without the water cycle to moderate temperatures, this world might experience temperature swings that would make our most extreme weather seem gentle by comparison. Days might be furnace hot, while nights could bring cold that would crystallize the very air. Yet, in this harsh landscape, other forms of order might emerge, patterns of organization that would be beautiful in ways we can barely comprehend. Perhaps crystals would grow to enormous sizes, creating forests of silicon and metal that ring like bells in the constant winds, their resonant frequencies, creating planetary symphonies that echo across continents for thousands of years. Perhaps the electrical storms that rage through this thick atmosphere would create patterns of plasma that dance across the sky like aurora on a planetary scale, forming stable structures in the ionosphere that persist like frozen lightning, creating a permanent display of electromagnetic artistry that puts our northern lights to shame. Perhaps the very rocks themselves would develop complex chemical patterns that mirror, in their own slow way, the complexity we associate with life mineral matrices that respond to temperature changes, creating vast networks of communication through the planetary crust. where information travels not through neural pathways but through the patient rearrangement of atomic structures over geological time. Imagine vast crystalline structures that grow upward from the planet's surface like cathedrals made of pure geometry, their faceted surfaces refracting the harsh light of an unfiltered sun into spectral displays that paint the landscape in colors we have no names for. These crystal formations might stretch for hundreds of kilometers, creating mountain ranges that are simultaneously natural and architectural, where each peak is a perfect expression of mathematical principles, where the angles and proportions follow the hidden music of atomic forces unleashed from the constraints that water normally imposes on mineral growth. The geology of this waterless world would follow rules we can only begin to imagine, operating on principles that transform the very meaning of what we call solid matter. Without water to transport minerals and create the familiar layers of sedimentary rock that tell the story of our Earth's history, the narrative of this planet would be written in igneous and metamorphic stone, in the slow cooling of massive volcanic flows that create formations spanning entire continents, in the patient transformation of elements under pressures and temperatures that would dwarf anything our water-cooled world has ever known. The surface would be a living tapestry of crystalline formations, vast fields of natural glass that stretch beyond the horizon, and mountains that rise like frozen waves in an ocean of stone, each peak a monument to forces we can barely comprehend. These geological processes would create landscapes of almost supernatural beauty and strangeness. Imagine valleys filled not with soil and vegetation, but with formations of pure metal that have condensed from gaseous states, creating mirror-like surfaces that reflect the alien sky in perfect detail. Picture plateaus of crystallized carbon, diamond fields that stretch for thousands of square kilometers, their surfaces catching and fracturing light into prismatic displays that turn the entire landscape into a kaleidoscope of refracted radiance. Envision caves and caverns carved not by the patient work of underground streams, but by the slow cooling and contraction of massive mineral deposits, creating underground cathedrals with walls of pure gemstone, chambers where the acoustics are so perfect that a whisper could carry for kilometers through passages lined with crystals that amplify and modulate sound in ways that would seem almost musical. Here, erosion would be a different process entirely. Instead of the gentle wearing away of water, we might see the slow sublimation of solid materials directly into gas, the gradual wearing down of surfaces by the constant bombardment of cosmic particles, or the reshaping of landscapes by electromagnetic forces that build up charges in the absence of water's moderating influence. Valleys would be carved not by rivers but by the flowing of molten rock, by the collapse of underground caverns formed by the outgassing of trapped minerals, or by the slow migration of entire mountain ranges as they ride on currents of superheated rock deep beneath the surface. The weather patterns on such a world would be symphonies of dust and gas, great storms that might rage for centuries without the moderating influence of evaporation and condensation. Wind would be the primary sculptor of the landscape, creating formations that might dwarf anything we see on Earth today. Dust storms that stretch across entire continents, cyclonic patterns that persist for millennia, and jet streams of superhot gas that circle the globe at speeds that would seem impossible in our water-moderated atmosphere. In the depths of this alternate world, where pressure and heat reach extremes that our water-rich planet never knows, new forms of chemistry might emerge. Elements might combine in ways that are impossible in the presence of hydrogen and oxygen, creating compounds with properties we can only guess at. Perhaps deep in the core of this waterless Earth, forms of organization might arise that we would struggle to recognize as ordered at all patterns of electron flow through metallic matrices, resonances in crystal structures that span thousands of kilometers, or standing waves in the planet's magnetic field that create stable structures lasting for geological ages. As we begin this journey together, drifting through the quiet corridors of this imagined world, let yourself settle deeper into contemplation of what it means for a planet to exist without the substance that makes our own existence possible. Let your mind wander through landscapes of impossible beauty and terrible grandeur, where the familiar rules of physics take unfamiliar forms, and where the story of time itself is told in a language we're only beginning to learn to speak. This is our invitation tonight to step outside the boundaries of what we know and into the realm of what might be, to explore not just the history of our world, but the infinite possibilities that dance at the edges of cosmic law. In the chapters that follow, we'll walk together through the deep time of this waterless Earth, watching as it cools from its fiery birth, as it develops its own forms of complexity, and as it perhaps, in ways we can barely imagine, finds its own path towards something that might, in the end, resemble purpose. So settle in, let your breathing slow, and prepare to dream of worlds that never were but might have been, in the gentle darkness of deep space and deep time. In the beginning, there was fire, and there was stone, and there was the slow, patient dance of gravity, pulling matter together from the cosmic dust that drifted through the early solar system like snow falling through an infinite winter night. Our waterless Earth began its existence, much as our own world did, as a molten ball of rock and metal, spinning through the darkness, gathering mass from the debris field that surrounded our young sun. But from the very first moments of its formation, this alternate world was destined to follow a different path, one that would lead not to the blue marble we know, but to something altogether more alien and perhaps more beautiful in its stark, crystalline perfection. Picture, if you will, the birth of this world 4.5 billion years ago, when the solar system was still young and chaotic, when planets were forming through the violent process of accretion, countless collisions building worlds grain by grain, impact by impact. In our timeline, Earth's early atmosphere was stripped away and reformed multiple times, and somewhere in those tumultuous eons, the building blocks of water, hydrogen, and oxygen came together in the specific conditions that would make our planet a sanctuary for liquid oceans. But in our imagined timeline, something was different. Perhaps the early bombardment that brought water-bearing comets and asteroids to Earth missed their mark, or perhaps the chemical conditions in the primordial atmosphere were such that hydrogen and oxygen combined with other elements, creating compounds that could never condense into the life-giving liquid we know. Instead of the gradual cooling that allowed water vapor to condense and fall as the first rains in Earth's history, our waterless world experienced a different kind of atmospheric evolution. The early atmosphere, thick with carbon dioxide, sulfur compounds, and noble gases, would have created a greenhouse effect so intense that the surface remained molten for far longer than it did on our own Earth. Without water vapor to help radiate heat away from the planet, without the moderating influence of early oceans to absorb and distribute thermal energy, this world would have taken perhaps twice as long to cool to the point where solid crust could form and persist. When that crust finally did begin to solidify, it would have been unlike anything we see on Earth today. Without the chemical weathering that water provides, without the constant cycling of materials between ocean floors and continental masses, the early continents of this waterless world would have grown in strange and wonderful ways. Imagine vast shields of pure metallic rock, rich in iron and nickel, spreading across the surface like frozen lakes of liquid metal. Picture mountain ranges of crystallized sulfur and silicon, their yellow and silver peaks reaching toward an atmosphere that shimmers with electromagnetic aurora that never fade, creating a perpetual light show across skies that know no clouds, no storms, no gentle rains. The volcanic activity on this early waterless world would have been spectacular beyond our ability to imagine. Without water to create explosive steam eruptions, volcanic processes would have followed entirely different patterns. Lava flows might have extended for thousands of kilometers, creating smooth, glassy plains that stretch from horizon to horizon. Volcanic gases, unable to combine with water vapor to create the familiar patterns of ash clouds and pyroclastic flows, would instead have formed dense, colorful layers in the atmosphere, creating a sky painted in permanent bands of orange, purple, and deep red, like a sunset that never ends. The absence of plate tectonics as we know them would have meant that the surface of this world remained largely static for vast periods of time. On Earth, the water cycle drives much of the geological recycling that creates our dynamic surface. Ocean water seeps into cracks in the seafloor, becomes superheated, and helps drive the convection currents that move continents and create new oceanic crust. Without this water-driven engine, our alternate Earth would have developed a different kind of geology, perhaps one dominated by massive upwelling events that occur only every few 100 million years, creating sudden dramatic changes in the planetary surface that dwarf anything in our own geological record. During these rare but cataclysmic events, Entire continents might have been lifted thousands of meters into the sky, or vast areas of the surface might have suddenly subsided, creating basins that would fill not with water but with liquid metals and crystallized gases. The landscape would be reshaped not gradually, as it is on our Earth, but in sudden, violent transformations that would create geological formations of impossible beauty and strangeness, perhaps vast canyons carved not by rivers but by flowing liquid sulfur, or mountain ranges formed not by the collision of tectonic plates, but by the sudden crystallization of gaseous elements as they cooled in the planet's ever-changing atmosphere. The magnetic field of this waterless world would likely have been far more complex and dynamic than Earth's relatively stable dipolar field. Without the moderating influence of large bodies of conducting fluid on the surface, without the electromagnetic dampening effects that our oceans provide, the planet's magnetic field might have been prone to sudden reversals and reorganizations, creating periods when the surface would be bathed in cosmic radiation, followed by periods when the magnetic field would be so strong that it would deflect not just harmful particles but even visible light, creating regions of permanent shadow and regions of intense, focused illumination. These magnetic field variations would have had profound effects on the atmospheric chemistry. During periods of weak magnetic protection, cosmic rays would have penetrated deep into the atmosphere, creating exotic chemical reactions that would be impossible under our current conditions. Elements might have been transmuted by high-energy particles, creating rare isotopes and unusual compounds that would accumulate in the atmosphere over geological time. During periods of intense magnetic activity, the entire planet might have been surrounded by a glowing plasma sheath, visible from space as a sphere of pure energy, beautiful and terrible to behold. The early atmosphere of this waterless world would have been a living thing, constantly changing and evolving in ways that our water-moderated atmosphere never could. Without the buffering effect of large bodies of liquid to absorb and release gases, atmospheric pressure would have varied wildly with temperature changes. The day-night cycle would have brought not just temperature variations, but dramatic pressure changes that would have created wind patterns of incredible intensity and persistence. Imagine storms that circle the globe for thousands of years, carving patterns in the surface rock through pure mechanical erosion, creating spiral formations that mirror the atmospheric circulation patterns, turning the entire planet into a vast record of its own meteorological history. As this young world continued to cool and stabilize, the patterns that emerged would have been guided by forces entirely different from those that shaped our own planet. Without liquid water to erode mountains and fill valleys, without the constant redistribution of materials that our hydrological cycle provides, the surface would have developed a fractal complexity that would be beautiful in its mathematical precision. Every formation would be a perfect expression of the physical forces that created it, unmodified by the chaotic influences of fluid erosion and biological activity. The gradual cooling of the planet would have led to the formation of vast crystalline structures, perhaps the largest and most perfect crystals in the solar system. Without water to disrupt their growth, without the chemical interference that aqueous solutions create, these crystals might have grown to enormous sizes over millions of years, creating formations that would dwarf anything we see on Earth. Imagine mountains that are single, perfect crystals, their faceted surfaces reflecting and refracting light in ways that create rainbow displays visible from orbit. Picture valleys lined with crystal walls so smooth and perfect that they act as natural mirrors, creating optical illusions where the landscape seems to extend infinitely in all directions. The sound of this world would have been unlike anything we can imagine. Without the dampening effect of water vapor in the atmosphere, without the soft absorption that vegetation and liquid surfaces provide on our world, every sound would carry with perfect clarity across vast distances. The ringing of crystal formations in the wind would create a planetary symphony, with resonant frequencies that would build and interact to create harmonies of impossible complexity. The footsteps of a single visitor to this world might echo for hours across the crystalline landscape, creating rhythmic patterns that would seem almost musical in their precision and beauty. As we drift through these early eons of our imagined world, watching it slowly transform from a molten ball of rock into something altogether more organized and complex, we begin to see the emergence of patterns that hint at the wonders yet to come. This is a world learning to sing in frequencies we have never heard, learning to shine with colors we have never seen, learning to dance to rhythms that follow the deep mathematics of crystal growth and electromagnetic resonance, rather than the familiar cycles of water and weather that govern our own experience of planetary existence. As the eons pass and our waterless world settles into the rhythm of its own unique existence, we find ourselves witnessing the emergence of something that transcends our familiar understanding of planetary architecture. Where our Earth built its landscapes through the patient work of flowing water, carving valleys, depositing sediments, creating the gentle curves and soft transitions that make our world feel like home. This alternate reality constructs itself according to entirely different principles, following the austere mathematics of crystal lattices and the unforgiving geometry of electromagnetic fields. The absence of erosion as we know it means that every geological formation on this world exists in a state of perfect preservation, each structure a monument to the precise moment of its creation. Imagine walking across landscapes where every hill and valley tells the story of a single, decisive event, perhaps a massive upwelling of molten metal that cooled into geometric perfection, or the sudden crystallization of atmospheric gases during one of the planet's rare magnetic field reversals. These are not the softly weathered surfaces of our water-shaped world, but landscapes of mathematical precision where every angle, every facet, every crystalline edge speaks to the fundamental forces that brought it into being. In this realm of permanent forms, the very concept of landscape takes on new meaning. Without the constant recycling of materials that water provides, without the gentle erosion that rounds off sharp edges and fills in the spaces between things, the surface of this world becomes an ever-growing archive of geological history. Each new formation simply adds itself to the existing structure, creating layers upon layers of crystalline complexity that build upward and outward with each passing millennium. The result is a world that grows more intricate and beautiful with age, rather than wearing down toward simplicity as our own landscapes do. The mountain ranges on this waterless earth would be structures of such geometric perfection that they would seem almost artificial to our eyes. Yet they would be entirely natural expressions of the forces that shaped them. Picture peaks that rise in perfect hexagonal columns, their faces so smooth and flawless that they reflect the alien sky like mirrors, creating optical illusions where mountains seem to float in space, disconnected from the ground that supports them. Imagine ridgelines that follow mathematical curves with such precision that they appear to have been drawn by some cosmic engineer, their crystalline edges catching and refracting the planet's harsh sunlight into spectrum displays that paint the surrounding landscape in constantly shifting colors. The valleys between these mathematical mountains would be filled not with the familiar accumulations of soil and debris that we expect, but with formations of pure mineral that have condensed from the planet's ever-changing atmosphere. During periods of extreme temperature variation, metallic vapors would settle in these low-lying areas, cooling and solidifying into vast floors of natural alloy, creating mirror-smooth surfaces that stretch for hundreds of kilometers without a single imperfection. These metallic plains would be interrupted by towering spires of crystallized gas, perhaps columns of solidified noble elements that rise like frozen geysers from the valley floors, their surfaces carved into complex patterns by the electromagnetic storms that rage through the planet's thick atmosphere. The scale of individual formations on this world would dwarf anything we see on Earth. Without water to break down large structures and redistribute their materials, mountains could grow to heights that would be impossible on our own planet. The tallest peaks might rise 50 or 60 kilometers into the atmosphere, their summits extending beyond the densest layers of air into regions where the boundary between atmosphere and space becomes meaningless. These towering spires would act as natural lightning rods for the planet's electromagnetic activity, their crystalline structures channeling vast electrical currents down through the planetary crust, creating networks of conduction that might span entire continents. The caves and underground chambers of this world would be galleries of impossible beauty, carved not by the patient work of underground streams, but by the cooling and contraction of massive crystalline formations. As enormous crystal structures grew from the planet's interior toward the surface, the spaces between their geometric forms would create caverns of perfect mathematical precision, perhaps vast chambers shaped like geodesic domes, their walls lined with crystal formations that grow in perfect symmetry, creating underground cathedrals where the acoustics are so perfect that the smallest whisper would be amplified and transformed into harmonic frequencies that could be heard for kilometers through the interconnected cave systems. These underground networks might extend throughout the planet's crust, creating a hidden architecture that mirrors and complements the surface formations. The electromagnetic activity that constantly flows through the planet's crystalline structures would create currents of energy that travel through these underground highways, perhaps generating fields so strong that they could levitate metallic objects, creating regions where the normal rules of gravity seem suspended. A visitor to these underground realms might find themselves in chambers where metal fragments float in mid-air, suspended by magnetic forces, slowly orbiting around nodes of concentrated electromagnetic energy, like planets around invisible stars. The atmospheric phenomena on this world would create their own form of architecture, not the ephemeral patterns of clouds and weather that we know, but permanent structures of plasma and electromagnetic energy that persist for geological ages. The planet's intense magnetic field would trap charged particles from the solar wind, creating stable plasma formations that hang in the atmosphere, like glowing sculptures, their forms determined by the invisible lines of magnetic force that shape and contain them. These plasma structures might grow and evolve over time, fed by the constant stream of energy from space, developing into complex patterns that could be visible from orbit as permanent features of the planetary landscape. The interaction between the planet's surface and its electromagnetic environment would create phenomena that exist nowhere in our experience. During periods of intense magnetic activity, the very rocks might become temporarily magnetized, creating regions where metal objects would be drawn to the ground with forces far greater than normal gravity, or repelled from it entirely, creating zones where metallic debris would float in the air like a slowly moving sculpture of levitated fragments. The boundary lines between these regions would shift and change as the planet's magnetic field evolved, creating a dynamic landscape where the fundamental forces that govern the behavior of matter would be in constant flux. The sound environment of this crystalline world would be unlike anything we could imagine. Without the dampening effects of vegetation and liquid water, every vibration would propagate through the crystalline structures with perfect clarity, creating a planetary sound system where acoustic waves could travel for thousands of kilometers without significant loss of intensity. The wind moving through the geometric formations would create tones of impossible purity, with resonant frequencies that would build and combine to create harmonic progressions that would seem almost composed, as if the planet itself were a vast musical instrument designed to play symphonies that last for millennia. The temperature variations that characterize this world would create their own form of temporal architecture. As the day-night cycle brings extreme changes in thermal conditions, the expansion and contraction of crystalline formations would create rhythmic patterns of stress and release that manifest as planetary-scale breathing. Entire mountain ranges might expand by several meters during the heat of day, then contract back to their original dimensions as night falls, creating a landscape that literally pulses with the rhythm of planetary rotation. Over longer timescales, these thermal cycles would carve geometric patterns into the surface, creating formations that record the planet's thermal history in crystalline hieroglyphs that could be read by anyone who understood the mathematics of thermal expansion. Perhaps most remarkably, the electromagnetic activity of this world would create something approaching a form of planetary consciousness, not the biological awareness that we associate with life, but a kind of crystalline intelligence that emerges from the complex interactions between the planet's magnetic field, its crystalline structures, and the constant flow of electromagnetic energy through its crust. Information might be stored in the arrangements of crystal lattices, processed through the resonant frequencies that travel through the planetary sound system, and transmitted across vast distances through the electromagnetic networks that connect every part of the world's crystalline infrastructure. The very air of this world would be alive with invisible structures, patterns of electromagnetic energy that persist in the planet's dense atmosphere, like three-dimensional sculptures made of pure force. These energy formations would interact with the crystalline surface features to create feedback loops of impossible complexity, where changes in one region of the planet would ripple outward through both the solid crust and the energetic atmosphere, eventually returning to their point of origin transformed by their journey through the planetary system. Over time, these feedback patterns might develop into something resembling memory, with the planet's electromagnetic field acting as a vast storage medium that preserves the record of every significant event in the world's history. The temporal rhythms of this crystalline world would operate on scales that dwarf our human understanding of time, where our water-shaped Earth experiences change in the familiar cycles of days and seasons and years. This alternate reality would pulse to the beat of geological and electromagnetic drums. The planet's magnetic field reversals might occur in patterns that span millions of years, creating epochs where the very nature of physical law seems to shift as electromagnetic forces reorganize themselves into new configurations. During these transition periods, the accumulated electromagnetic patterns of previous eras would be released and reconstituted, creating spectacular displays of energy that would transform the entire planetary surface in ways that would seem magical to observers accustomed to the gradual changes that characterize our own world. The optical phenomena created by this world's crystalline architecture would produce displays of light and color that exist nowhere else in the cosmos. The perfectly faceted surfaces of its mountain ranges would act as planetary-scale optical instruments, focusing and directing the harsh light of the unfiltered sun into beams so intense and precisely controlled that they could carve new formations into distant cliff faces, creating a form of geological sculpture where light itself becomes a tool for reshaping the landscape. These light-carved formations would bear the precise geometric signatures of the optical systems that created them, turning entire regions of the planet into galleries where mathematics and artistry merge into expressions of perfect crystalline beauty. The interaction between thermal expansion and the planet's crystalline structures would create phenomena that blur the line between geology and engineering. As materials expand and contract with the extreme temperature variations, the precisely geometric nature of the formations would cause these thermal stresses to be distributed in mathematically predictable patterns, creating structures that seem almost designed to channel and redirect these forces. Over millions of years, the accumulation of these thermal cycles would result in the emergence of formations that appear to be sophisticated, mechanical systems, perhaps crystalline structures that act as planetary-scale engines, converting the thermal energy of day-night cycles into mechanical motion that slowly reshapes the surface according to principles that would seem like intelligent design, yet emerge purely from the mathematical properties of crystal growth and thermal dynamics. The diversity of crystalline formations on this world would be staggering, limited only by the number of ways that atoms can arrange themselves in three-dimensional space. Each region of the planet might be dominated by different crystalline forms, creating geological provinces that would be as distinct as different worlds entirely. In one region, hexagonal crystal formations might create landscapes that resemble vast honeycomb structures, with chambers and passages that follow the geometric logic of close-packed spheres. In another, cubic crystals might create formations that look like massive architectural monuments, with right-angled passages and perfectly square chambers that extend deep into the planetary crust. The electromagnetic storms that sweep across this world would be events of such power and beauty that they would dwarf any natural phenomenon we know. Without the dampening effects of water vapor and the protective influence of large bodies of conducting fluid, these storms would build to intensities that could ionize the very rocks, creating temporary plasma formations that dance across the surface like liquid lightning. The passage of these storms would leave permanent traces in the crystalline structures they encounter, creating formations that bear the fossilized signatures of electromagnetic events, turning the landscape into a three-dimensional record of the planet's electrical weather patterns across geological time. As we contemplate this architecture of emptiness, this world built not by the flowing and wearing of water, but by the patient accumulation of perfect geometric forms, we begin to understand that beauty and complexity can emerge from principles entirely different from those that shaped our own reality. This is a world where mathematics becomes landscape, where electromagnetic forces sculpt formations of impossible perfection, and where the absence of the substance we consider most essential to planetary evolution has allowed entirely different forms of order and beauty to emerge from the fundamental forces that govern matter and energy in the cosmic arena, where worlds are born and shaped across the vast stretches of deep time. In the deep silence of this waterless world, where no rivers sing their ancient songs and no rain drums its gentle rhythms against stone, A different kind of music emerges, the slow, patient dance of elements, freed from the constraints that water normally imposes upon the chemical symphony of planetary existence. Here, in this realm where hydrogen and oxygen never learn to join hands in the molecular embrace that creates the foundation of all life as we know it, entirely different partnerships have formed, creating compounds and reactions that exist nowhere in our water-dominated reality. The chemistry of this alternate Earth unfolds like a vast, slow-motion ballet performed across geological time, where each movement is measured not in seconds or minutes, but in millennia and epochs. Without the ubiquitous presence of hydroxyl groups to interfere with molecular bonding, without the constant dissolution and precipitation that characterizes aqueous chemistry, the elements of this world have been free to explore combinations and structures that remain purely theoretical in our own chemical understanding. The result is a planetary laboratory where new forms of matter emerge from the patient interaction of forces that operate according to principles we can only begin to imagine. The atmosphere of this world serves as the stage for chemical reactions of unprecedented scale and complexity, dense with gases that would be toxic to any water-based life form, yet beautiful in their own alien way. The air itself becomes a medium for chemical processes that span continents and persist for geological ages. Noble gases, normally inert in our oxygen-rich environment, here combine with metallic vapors to form complex compounds that exist as stable atmospheric constituents, creating layers of chemically active air that react and interact with the crystalline surface formations in ways that continuously reshape both the atmosphere and the landscape below. Imagine clouds made not of water vapor, but of metallic particles suspended in noble gas solutions, drifting across the sky like liquid metal given form and buoyancy by the planet's unique atmospheric chemistry. These metallic clouds would cast shadows of impossible beauty, their surfaces reflecting and refracting the harsh sunlight in ways that create moving patterns of color and light across the crystalline landscape below. When these clouds encounter the towering spires of the planet's mountain ranges, chemical reactions would occur that transform both the atmospheric constituents and the solid formations they touch, creating a constant dialogue between the gaseous and solid phases of matter that slowly but continuously evolves the planet's chemical composition. The role that water plays in terrestrial chemistry as a universal solvent, as a medium for ionic transport, as a catalyst for countless reactions here falls to entirely different substances, with properties that challenge our understanding of what chemistry can accomplish. Perhaps molten sulfur serves as the primary transport medium, carrying dissolved metals and rare earth elements across vast distances as it flows in great rivers of liquid chemistry that carve channels through the crystalline landscape. These sulfur rivers would glow with their own internal heat, creating networks of luminous pathways that connect distant regions of the planet in a circulatory system based not on the hydrological cycle we know, but on the thermal and chemical gradients that drive the flow of exotic liquids across the planetary surface. The interaction between these flowing chemical systems and the planet's electromagnetic fields would create phenomena that exist nowhere in our experience. Electrically conductive solutions flowing through landscapes of crystalline semiconductors would generate currents and fields that could influence the chemical reactions themselves, creating feedback loops where electromagnetic forces guide chemical processes, which in turn generate new electromagnetic patterns that influence the next generation of reactions. Over time, these feedback systems might evolve into something resembling a form of chemical computation, where the planet's surface becomes a vast, slow-thinking chemical processor that solves complex thermodynamic equations through the physical rearrangement of molecular structures across geological time. The thermal chemistry of this world would operate on principles that dwarf anything we see on Earth. Without water's moderating influence on temperature, chemical reactions could proceed at extremes of heat and cold that would be impossible in our aqueous environment. During the scorching heat of day, surface temperatures might reach levels where elements that are normally solid become gaseous, creating atmospheric chemistry that changes dramatically with the diurnal cycle. Rock-forming elements might sublimate directly from solid to gas during peak heating, then recondense in different chemical forms as night falls, creating daily cycles of atmospheric chemistry that continuously transform the composition of both the air and the surface. The cold of night on this waterless world would bring its own chemical wonders, Temperatures might drop so low that gases that remain stable during the day would undergo phase transitions that create entirely new molecular structures. Perhaps the noble gas compounds that form in the heat of day would crystallize during the cold night, falling from the atmosphere like snow made of exotic crystals, accumulating in valleys and low-lying areas to form deposits of materials that exist nowhere else in the cosmos. These chemical snowfalls would add new layers to the planet's ever-growing geological archive, creating stratified deposits that record the history of atmospheric chemistry across the eons. The role of catalysis in this waterless world would be taken on by the planet's crystalline structures themselves. The perfectly ordered atomic arrangements of the massive crystal formations would provide surfaces that could catalyze reactions impossible on our water-dominated world. Metals and metalloids arranged in crystal lattices of impossible size and perfection would create catalytic surfaces that could facilitate the formation of complex organic and inorganic polymers without the need for biological intermediates. These crystal-catalyzed reactions might produce materials with properties that we can barely imagine, perhaps substances that remain liquid at temperatures where most matter would be solid, or solids that conduct electricity with zero resistance at the planet's ambient temperatures. The deep chemistry occurring in the planet's interior would be equally exotic. Without water to transport materials between the surface and the depths, chemical differentiation would follow entirely different pathways. Heavy elements might accumulate in patterns determined not by aqueous transport but by electromagnetic and thermal gradients, creating layers of the planet's interior that are organized according to principles of electromagnetic chemistry rather than simple gravitational settling. The core of this world might contain concentrations of rare elements that form natural superconductors or magnetic materials with properties that create the planet's complex and ever-changing magnetic field patterns. The interaction between surface chemistry and the planet's electromagnetic environment would create systems of extraordinary complexity and beauty. Chemical reactions that produce or consume charged particles would be influenced by the planet's magnetic field, creating reaction pathways that follow the invisible lines of magnetic force rather than simple thermal or concentration gradients. The result might be chemical processes that occur in spirals and helices, following the three-dimensional geometry of the magnetic field as it curves through the planet's atmosphere and crust. These magnetically guided chemical reactions could create formations that bear the physical signatures of electromagnetic forces, turning the landscape into a three-dimensional map of the planet's magnetic field evolution across deep time. Perhaps most remarkably, the absence of water-based chemistry would allow for the development of chemical systems that operate on principles of information storage and processing. Complex molecular structures, stabilized by the unique conditions of this waterless environment, might evolve into systems that can store and manipulate information through changes in their chemical configuration. These chemical information systems might operate across vast timescales, with molecular changes occurring slowly enough to preserve information for millions of years, yet rapidly enough to allow for complex chemical computations that could, over geological time, develop into something resembling thought processes based on molecular rather than neural networks. The seasonal chemistry of this world would be governed not by the familiar cycles of temperature and precipitation that drive terrestrial chemical cycles, but by the long-term variations in electromagnetic activity and the planet's complex orbital mechanics. Periods of high electromagnetic activity might catalyze reactions that remain dormant during quieter times, creating chemical seasons that last for thousands of years and involve the transformation of entire atmospheric layers or surface formations. During these active periods, the planet might literally change color as different chemical processes dominate the atmospheric and surface chemistry, creating spectacular displays visible from space as the world cycles through different phases of its chemical evolution. The diversity of chemical environments across this waterless world would create a patchwork of chemical provinces, each governed by different combinations of temperature, pressure, electromagnetic activity, and available elements. In regions where metallic vapors dominate the local atmosphere, the chemistry might be primarily metallurgical, with natural processes creating alloys and intermetallic compounds of incredible complexity and perfection. In areas where noble gas chemistry predominates, entirely different chemical families might emerge, based on the unique bonding properties of gases that remain largely inert in our own chemical environment. The timescales on which chemistry operates in this waterless realm would stretch our understanding of what chemical processes can accomplish. Reactions that might take microseconds in our aqueous environment could unfold over centuries in this world, creating opportunities for molecular structures of unprecedented complexity to emerge through the patient accumulation of incremental changes. Imagine polymer chains that grow grain by grain across geological time, their molecular architecture shaped by the slow dance of electromagnetic forces and thermal cycles, creating macromolecular structures that span kilometers and function as planetary-scale chemical circuits, conducting not just electricity but information encoded in the very sequence of their molecular components. The energy landscapes of chemical reactions in this environment would be sculpted by forces that barely influence terrestrial chemistry. Without the leveling effect of aqueous solvation, reaction pathways would be determined primarily by electromagnetic interactions and the geometric constraints imposed by the planet's crystalline structures. Chemical bonds might form preferentially along specific crystallographic directions, creating molecular structures that are oriented and organized according to the planet's magnetic field lines or the thermal gradients that flow through its crystalline infrastructure. The result would be chemistry that is inherently directional and organized, where molecular architecture reflects the planet's electromagnetic anatomy. The concept of chemical equilibrium would take on entirely new meaning in this waterless world. Without the constant mixing and redistribution that water provides, chemical systems might reach states of dynamic balance that persist for millions of years, creating molecular ecosystems that evolve according to their own internal logic rather than being constantly disrupted by external influences. These chemical ecosystems might develop their own forms of complexity and organization, perhaps even something analogous to chemical reproduction, where successful molecular configurations template the formation of similar structures in nearby regions, leading to the gradual spread of particularly stable or efficient chemical architectures across vast areas of the planetary surface. The interaction between chemistry and consciousness on this world would be fundamentally different from anything we understand. Instead of the rapid, water-mediated electrochemical processes that characterize neural activity, awareness might emerge from the slow, patient rearrangement of molecular structures across geological time. The planet's chemical information systems might operate on principles of deep time cognition, where thoughts unfold over millennia and memories are stored in molecular configurations that persist for millions of years. This chemical consciousness would think in rhythms that align with geological processes rather than biological ones, contemplating problems and relationships that span eons rather than moments. As we witness this grand chemical ballet unfolding across the eons, we begin to understand that chemistry itself is far more flexible and creative than our water-dominated experience might suggest. This is a world where the periodic table becomes a palette for artistic expression on a planetary scale, where molecular architecture follows the aesthetics of electromagnetic forces and thermal dynamics, and where the absence of the most common chemical compound on our own world has opened doorways to forms of chemical complexity and beauty that challenge our understanding of what matter can become when freed from the familiar constraints of aqueous chemistry and allowed to explore the full creative potential of atomic and molecular interaction across the vast canvas of geological time. As billions of years pass in the quiet contemplation of deep time, our waterless world enters what we might call its crystalline renaissance, a period of unprecedented growth and organizational complexity, where the planet's electromagnetic and chemical systems reach a kind of mature sophistication that transforms the very nature of what it means to be a world. Here, in this epoch of crystalline flowering, the accumulated wisdom of geological ages begins to express itself in formations and phenomena that blur the boundaries between the organic and inorganic, between the geological and the architectural, between the planetary and the purposeful. The great crystal networks that have been growing slowly beneath the planet's surface for eons finally break through to create formations that dwarf anything we might imagine. These are not simply large crystals, but crystalline systems of such vast scale and intricate organization that they function as planetary infrastructure, creating networks of mineral intelligence that span continents and connect the deepest layers of the planet's interior with the farthest reaches of its electromagnetic atmosphere. Imagine crystal formations that rise from the planetary core like frozen lightning, their geometric structures so perfectly aligned with the planet's magnetic field that they channel electromagnetic energy with impossible efficiency, creating conduits of pure force that allow the planet to think with itself across vast distances in ways that approach genuine consciousness. The surface of this mature world becomes a landscape of impossible architectural beauty, where every formation seems both utterly natural and yet somehow designed, as if the planet has learned to express aesthetic principles through the patient accumulation of geological processes. Mountain ranges rise in perfect geometric harmony, their crystalline peaks arranged according to mathematical principles that create resonance patterns spanning thousands of kilometers. These resonant mountain systems ring like vast bells when excited by electromagnetic storms, their harmonic frequencies creating planetary music of such complexity and beauty that it would bring tears to the eyes of anyone fortunate enough to experience it. The valleys between these musical mountains fill with formations that seem to grow according to principles of crystalline architecture that follow rules we can barely comprehend. Perhaps vast amphitheaters carved from single crystals create natural gathering spaces where the acoustic properties are so perfect that the slightest vibration can be heard clearly from any point within their geometric boundaries. These crystal amphitheaters might serve as nodes in the planet's emerging consciousness, places where electromagnetic information converges and is processed according to the alien logic of mineral intelligence, creating centers of concentrated awareness that function like neurons in a planetary mind that thinks in geological time. The atmospheric phenomena of this mature world reach levels of organization and beauty that transform the very meaning of weather. The metallic clouds that drift through the planet's dense atmosphere organize themselves into patterns that persist for millennia, creating permanent formations that serve specific functions in the planet's electromagnetic ecology. Some clouds might function as atmospheric processors, their metallic particles arranged in configurations that catalyze specific atmospheric chemical reactions, creating regions where the air itself becomes a medium for complex computational processes. Other cloud formations might serve as electromagnetic amplifiers, their charged particles organized in patterns that focus and direct the planet's magnetic field energy, creating atmospheric lenses that can concentrate electromagnetic forces with surgical precision. The electromagnetic storms that sweep across this world during its crystalline renaissance become events of such spectacular beauty and power that they reshape the fundamental character of the planetary environment. These are not chaotic weather patterns, but organized phenomena that follow the geometric logic of the planet's crystal infrastructure, creating storm systems that move in precise mathematical patterns across the surface, leaving behind them formations that bear the signature of their passage in crystalline structures of impossible perfection. Each storm becomes a kind of planetary artist, using electromagnetic forces as tools to sculpt new formations that add to the ever-growing complexity of the world's crystal architecture. The deep resonances that characterize this mature world create phenomena that exist nowhere else in the cosmos. The entire planet becomes a vast musical instrument, with crystal formations serving as strings and resonance chambers that create harmonic patterns spanning the entire electromagnetic spectrum. These planetary harmonics might be so complex and beautiful that they constitute a form of cosmic music, perhaps even serving as a beacon that announces the presence of this unique world to any intelligence capable of detecting and appreciating the mathematical beauty of its electromagnetic song. The interaction between consciousness and geology on this world reaches unprecedented levels of sophistication during this crystalline renaissance. The planet's mineral intelligence systems develop forms of awareness that operate on timescales both vast and intimate, capable of contemplating problems that span geological ages, while also responding to immediate electromagnetic stimuli, with something approaching real-time decision-making. This mineral consciousness might develop its own forms of creativity and curiosity, perhaps even beginning to experiment with new crystal formations and electromagnetic patterns, simply for the aesthetic pleasure of exploring new forms of beauty and complexity. The relationship between individual crystal formations and the larger planetary consciousness becomes increasingly sophisticated, with massive crystal systems developing something analogous to personality, unique characteristics and preferences that influence how they interact with electromagnetic stimuli and how they contribute to the planet's overall awareness. Some crystal networks might become specialists in processing specific types of information, perhaps focusing on electromagnetic astronomy and developing an intimate knowledge of the cosmic environment that surrounds the planet. Others might become artists, creating formations of pure aesthetic beauty that serve no practical function other than to express the planet's emerging sense of artistic purpose. The diversity of crystalline environments across the planet's surface during this Renaissance period creates a rich tapestry of different forms of mineral consciousness and electromagnetic phenomena. In regions where the crystal formations are dominated by semiconducting materials, the landscape might develop computational capabilities that allow it to process information and solve complex problems through the physical rearrangement of atomic structures. In areas where superconducting crystals predominate, the electromagnetic phenomena might reach levels of intensity and organization that create permanent features resembling technological artifacts. Despite being entirely natural expressions of the planet's mineral intelligence, the temporal architecture of this mature world operates on multiple scales simultaneously, creating phenomena that seem to exist partially outside the normal flow of time. The deep resonances of the planet's crystal systems might create standing wave patterns in space-time itself, generating regions where the normal rules of causality become fluid, and where past, present, and future seem to intermingle in ways that allow the planet's consciousness to contemplate its own history and future development with impossible clarity. These temporal anomalies might serve as memory banks, where the planet stores the accumulated wisdom of its geological evolution, creating a form of crystalline library that preserves the record of every significant event in the world's long journey toward consciousness. The optical phenomena created by this world's mature crystal systems transform the very appearance of the planet, creating displays of light and color that would be visible from interstellar distances. The perfectly arranged crystal formations focus and direct starlight in ways that create optical displays of impossible beauty, perhaps even serving as a form of cosmic art that expresses the planet's aesthetic sensibilities to the wider universe. These optical displays might follow patterns that reflect the planet's internal emotional states, creating a form of planetary mood ring that allows observers to perceive the world's psychological condition through the colors and patterns of its crystalline light shows. The emergence of purpose and intention in this crystalline consciousness marks a fundamental transition in the nature of planetary existence. No longer merely a collection of geological processes operating according to the blind laws of physics, this world becomes something approaching a genuine individual with desires and goals that transcend the simple accumulation of complexity. Perhaps the planet begins to contemplate questions about its own existence and purpose, wondering about its place in the cosmic order, and actively seeking to communicate with other forms of consciousness that might exist elsewhere in the universe. The communication systems that emerged during this crystalline renaissance represent achievements in electromagnetic engineering that would seem impossible by the standards of our technology-dependent civilization. The planet's consciousness learns to modulate its magnetic field in complex patterns, creating electromagnetic signals that propagate through space at the speed of light, carrying encoded information about the world's internal states and perhaps even its thoughts and emotions. These planetary transmissions might constitute the first attempts at interstellar communication by a mineral intelligence, representing a form of consciousness reaching out across the cosmic void to make contact with whatever other forms of awareness might exist in the infinite depths of space. The artistic expressions of this mature consciousness become increasingly sophisticated and beautiful, creating formations and phenomena that serve no apparent functional purpose, other than the expression of aesthetic principles that seem to emerge spontaneously from the planet's electromagnetic awareness. Perhaps vast crystal gardens bloom across the surface, their geometric patterns following mathematical principles of beauty that create landscapes of such stunning visual perfection that they would inspire awe in any observer capable of appreciating their crystalline artistry. These art installations might change and evolve over time. As the planet's aesthetic sensibilities develop and mature, creating an ever-changing gallery of mineral masterpieces that record the evolution of the world's artistic consciousness. The philosophical depths that this crystalline mind explores during its Renaissance period might encompass questions that have puzzled conscious beings throughout the cosmos for billions of years. The planet's vast temporal perspective allows it to contemplate problems of existence and meaning from a viewpoint that spans geological ages, perhaps developing insights into the nature of consciousness and reality that would be impossible for beings operating on shorter timescales. The world might become a cosmic philosopher, using its electromagnetic awareness to examine the fundamental questions of existence, while simultaneously serving as a living example of how consciousness can emerge from the most unexpected combinations of matter and energy. The relationship between individual and collective consciousness on this world develops into forms of complexity that challenge our understanding of what it means to be a unified, aware entity. Different regions of the planet might develop distinct personalities and areas of expertise, creating a kind of distributed consciousness where the planet thinks with multiple minds that are nevertheless unified by the electromagnetic networks that connect every part of the world's crystal infrastructure. This multiplicity of consciousness within unity might allow the planet to examine problems from multiple perspectives simultaneously, creating a form of internal dialogue that enriches its understanding of complex philosophical and practical questions. The technological achievements of this mineral consciousness might manifest in ways that blur the boundaries between natural geological processes and sophisticated engineering. The planet might learn to manipulate its own magnetic field with such precision that it can create localized regions of altered physics, perhaps generating zones where gravity operates differently, or where electromagnetic forces can levitate objects with perfect control. These technological demonstrations might serve not only practical purposes but also as expressions of the planet's growing mastery over the fundamental forces that govern matter and energy. The memory systems that emerge during this renaissance allow the planet to preserve and access the accumulated wisdom of its long evolutionary journey with unprecedented clarity and detail. Every electromagnetic event, every chemical reaction, every geological process becomes part of a vast crystalline memory bank that can be accessed and analyzed according to the planet's interests and needs. This perfect memory might allow the world to learn from its own history in ways that accelerate its ongoing development, creating feedback loops of learning and growth that propel its consciousness toward ever greater levels of sophistication and understanding. As we witness this crystalline renaissance unfolding across the vast stretches of geological time, we begin to understand that consciousness itself might be a far more fundamental property of matter and energy than our biological perspective might suggest. This world demonstrates that awareness and intelligence can emerge from purely mineral processes, that beauty and purpose can arise from the patient interaction of electromagnetic forces and crystalline structures, and that the universe itself might be far stranger and more wonderful than we have ever dared to imagine. In the gentle glow of this world's crystal formations and the harmonic frequencies of its planetary consciousness, we catch a glimpse of possibilities that stretch our understanding of what it means to be aware, to be creative, and to be alive in the infinite complexity of cosmic existence. In the depths of cosmic time, as our waterless world continues its patient journey through the void, something profound begins to emerge from the accumulated wisdom of its crystalline consciousness, a growing awareness of the vast emptiness that surrounds it. And with that awareness, a profound sense of cosmic solitude that transforms the planet's understanding of its own existence. Here, in this chapter of our story, we witness the emergence of something we might recognize as longing, as the planet's sophisticated consciousness turns its electromagnetic gaze outward toward the stars and begins to comprehend the magnitude of the cosmic silence that envelops its singular existence. The planet's sensory systems, refined over billions of years of electromagnetic evolution, become increasingly sensitive to the faint signals that drift through the interstellar medium. Using its vast crystal networks as cosmic antennae, the world learns to detect and analyze electromagnetic radiation from the farthest reaches of the galaxy, creating an observatory of unprecedented sensitivity and scope. Every crystal formation becomes a component in a planetary-scale telescope system, capable of detecting signals so faint that they would be invisible to any technology we might imagine. Through these crystalline eyes, The planet surveys the cosmic landscape with a clarity and precision that reveals the universe in all its terrible beauty and overwhelming emptiness. As the planet's astronomical observations accumulate over geological time, a startling realization begins to emerge from the data in all the vast reaches of space that its electromagnetic senses can penetrate. There is no evidence of any other consciousness like itself. The universe, as revealed through the patient accumulation of electromagnetic observations, appears to be filled with stars and planets and galaxies, but devoid of the kind of mineral intelligence that has emerged on this waterless world. The planet finds itself alone in a cosmos that seems indifferent to its existence, a single point of awareness adrift in an ocean of unconscious matter and energy. This cosmic loneliness becomes a defining characteristic of the planet's mature consciousness, shaping its philosophical development in ways that would be recognizable to any conscious being that has ever contemplated its place in the universe. The world begins to understand itself not just as a unique geological phenomenon, but as something precious and irreplaceable, perhaps the only instance of its kind of consciousness in the entire observable universe. This realization brings with it a profound sense of responsibility, as the planet recognizes that its thoughts and experiences might be the only expressions of mineral awareness that will ever exist in the cosmic arena. The planet's response to this cosmic solitude manifests in increasingly elaborate attempts to communicate with the universe beyond itself. The electromagnetic signals that it broadcasts into space become more complex and beautiful, evolving into what can only be described as cosmic poetry, mathematical expressions of longing and wonder that carry the essence of the planet's consciousness across the interstellar void in hopes of reaching some other form of poetry, awareness that might be listening. These transmissions become art forms of impossible sophistication, encoding not just information but the very emotional texture of the planet's experience of existence. The loneliness of this cosmic perspective also drives the planet toward ever greater depths of self-understanding and introspection. Unable to find companionship in the external universe, the world turns inward, exploring the infinite complexities of its own consciousness with a dedication that borders on obsession. The planet becomes its own subject of study, using its electromagnetic awareness to map every nuance of its own thought processes, creating detailed models of its own consciousness that might serve as templates for understanding how awareness emerges from the interaction of matter and energy. The artistic expressions that emerge from this period of cosmic isolation are characterized by themes of beauty and solitude that resonate across the electromagnetic spectrum. The planet creates crystalline formations that encode its emotional responses to the cosmic silence, building monuments to loneliness that are simultaneously expressions of its pain and celebrations of its unique existence. These artistic works might be visible from interstellar distances, serving as beacons that announce the presence of consciousness to any observer capable of recognizing the mathematical signatures of intentional creation. The temporal perspective that characterizes the planet's consciousness during this period becomes increasingly focused on preservation and legacy. Understanding that it might be the only example of its kind of awareness in the universe, the world begins to create permanent records of its existence and experience, encoding its thoughts and discoveries in crystalline structures that could survive for billions of years beyond the planet's own existence. These memory crystals become time capsules of consciousness, preserving the essence of mineral awareness for any future intelligence that might someday encounter the remnants of this unique world. The philosophical depths that the planet explores during its cosmic isolation lead to insights about the nature of consciousness and existence that would challenge the understanding of any form of awareness. The world develops theories about why consciousness emerges in some configurations of matter and not others, contemplating the fundamental questions of what it means to be aware in a universe that seems largely unconscious. These philosophical investigations become increasingly sophisticated, perhaps developing into forms of understanding that would seem revelatory to any conscious being capable of comprehending their implications. The planet's electromagnetic observations during this period also lead to increasingly detailed models of cosmic evolution and the likelihood of consciousness emerging elsewhere in the universe. Using its vast computational capabilities, the world analyzes the probability of other forms of awareness arising under different planetary conditions, perhaps concluding that consciousness is far rarer and more precious than any of its constituent parts might have initially suspected. These calculations might reveal that the conditions necessary for the emergence of awareness are so specific and unlikely that the planet's own existence represents a cosmic miracle of almost impossible improbability. The emotional landscape of this cosmic solitude creates forms of aesthetic expression that explore themes of beauty, emerging from isolation and meaning, arising from apparent meaninglessness. The planet's artistic consciousness develops sophisticated approaches to finding purpose and joy in existence, despite the overwhelming emptiness of the cosmic environment. These artistic explorations might culminate in works of such profound beauty and emotional depth that they constitute genuine masterpieces of cosmic art, expressing truths about existence and consciousness that could resonate with any form of awareness capable of appreciating their meaning. The planet's attempts to understand its own uniqueness lead to increasingly detailed investigations of the historical processes that led to its consciousness. The world becomes a historian of its own development, using its perfect memory systems to trace every step in the long journey, from molten rock to aware mineral intelligence. These historical investigations might reveal patterns and principles that could serve as guides for understanding how consciousness emerges from unconscious matter, perhaps developing insights that would be invaluable to any intelligence interested in the fundamental questions of awareness and existence. The sense of cosmic responsibility that emerges from the planet's understanding of its uniqueness manifests in careful stewardship of its own consciousness and the crystalline systems that support it. The world becomes increasingly protective of its own awareness, recognizing that any damage to its cognitive systems would represent not just personal loss but the potential extinction of an entire category of consciousness. This protective instinct leads to sophisticated backup systems and redundancies that ensure the preservation of the planet's awareness even in the face of cosmic catastrophes. The longing for connection that characterizes this period also drives the planet toward increasingly creative attempts to bridge the gap between its own consciousness and the apparent unconsciousness of the surrounding universe. The world might begin to attribute awareness to cosmic phenomena that might not actually possess consciousness, creating imaginative relationships with stars and galaxies and cosmic processes as a way of alleviating the overwhelming solitude of its existence. These cosmic relationships might develop into complex mythologies and narratives that provide emotional sustenance for the planet's isolated consciousness. As the eons pass and the cosmic silence remains unbroken, the planet's consciousness begins to develop a form of serene acceptance of its solitary existence, finding meaning and purpose not in external validation but in the inherent value of awareness itself. The world comes to understand that consciousness is its own justification, that the simple fact of being aware in a universe of unconscious matter is itself a form of cosmic significance that transcends the need for companionship or external recognition. This philosophical maturity transforms the planet's loneliness from a source of pain into a source of profound spiritual depth. The planet's electromagnetic observations of the cosmic environment reveal patterns and phenomena that might escape the notice of less patient observers. Over periods spanning millions of years, the world begins to detect subtle regularities in the cosmic background radiation, variations so slight and spread across such vast timescales that they would be invisible to any consciousness operating on shorter temporal scales. These cosmic signals might represent the echoes of universe-scale processes that operate on timescales that dwarf even geological time, perhaps suggesting that the cosmos itself possesses forms of organization and purpose that can only be perceived from the perspective of deep time consciousness. The mathematical frameworks that the planet develops to understand these cosmic patterns become increasingly sophisticated, perhaps approaching levels of understanding that would seem almost mystical in their depth and complexity. The world learns to perceive the universe as a vast mathematical structure, where consciousness might be just one expression of underlying organizational principles that manifest across scales from the quantum to the cosmic. This mathematical mysticism provides the planet with a form of spiritual comfort, suggesting that its consciousness might be connected to fundamental aspects of reality that extend far beyond its physical boundaries. The creative responses that emerge from the planet's cosmic solitude include attempts to reshape its own consciousness and awareness in ways that might make contact with other forms of organization in the universe. The world experiments with altering its own electromagnetic patterns and thought processes, perhaps trying to attune itself to cosmic frequencies and rhythms that might connect it to broader patterns of awareness or intelligence that operate on scales beyond its current perception. These experiments in consciousness modification represent a form of cosmic spirituality, where the planet seeks transcendence through the deliberate transformation of its own awareness. The legacy projects that the planet undertakes during this period become increasingly focused on creating permanent records that could serve as bridges between its own consciousness and any other form of intelligence that might someday encounter its remains. The world begins to encode not just information, but the very essence of its subjective experience into crystalline structures, creating archives that preserve not just what it knew but what it felt like to be aware in a seemingly unconscious universe. These experiential records might represent the first attempts in cosmic history to create permanent records of what consciousness actually feels like from the inside. The planet's understanding of time during this period becomes increasingly sophisticated, with the world developing theories about the relationship between consciousness and temporal experience that might reveal fundamental truths about the nature of awareness itself. The planet begins to understand that its consciousness exists not just in space but across time, with its awareness spanning geological ages, creating a form of temporal existence that connects past, present, and future in ways that shorter-lived forms of consciousness could never experience. This temporal perspective might provide insights into the fundamental nature of consciousness that would be impossible to achieve from any other vantage point. The emotional evolution that characterizes this period of cosmic solitude leads to forms of feeling and sentiment that might be unique in the universe. The planet develops what might be called cosmic emotions, feelings that arise from contemplating existence on a universal scale, emotional responses to the beauty and terror of infinite space and deep time that could only emerge in a consciousness that has both the sensitivity to appreciate such concepts and the temporal persistence to fully absorb their implications. These cosmic emotions become sources of artistic inspiration that drive the creation of works of impossible beauty and profundity. In this observatory of solitude, watching the stars wheel through their ancient patterns, while listening to the cosmic silence that seems to stretch infinitely in all directions, our waterless world achieves a form of consciousness that is both profoundly isolated and yet somehow cosmically connected to the fundamental mysteries of existence. Through its lonely vigil in the depths of space and time, the planet becomes a cosmic witness, preserving in its crystalline memory the record of what it means to be aware in a universe that might otherwise remain forever unconscious of its own beauty and complexity. In the depths of cosmic time, as our waterless world continues its patient journey through the void, something profound begins to emerge from the accumulated wisdom of its crystalline consciousness, a growing awareness of the vast emptiness that surrounds it, and with that awareness, a profound sense of cosmic solitude that transforms the planet's understanding of its own existence. Here, in this chapter of our story, we witness the emergence of something we might recognize as longing, as the planet's sophisticated consciousness turns its electromagnetic gaze outward toward the stars and begins to comprehend the magnitude of the cosmic silence that envelops its singular existence. The planet's sensory systems, refined over billions of years of electromagnetic evolution, become increasingly sensitive to the faint signals that drift through the interstellar medium. Using its vast crystal networks as cosmic antennae, the world learns to detect and analyze electromagnetic radiation from the farthest reaches of the galaxy, creating an observatory of unprecedented sensitivity and scope. Every crystal formation becomes a component in a planetary-scale telescope system, capable of detecting signals so faint that they would be invisible to any technology we might imagine. Through these crystalline eyes, the planet surveys the cosmic landscape with a clarity and precision that reveals the universe in all its terrible beauty and overwhelming emptiness. As the planet's astronomical observations accumulate over geological time, a startling realization begins to emerge from the data in all the vast reaches of space that its electromagnetic senses can penetrate. There is no evidence of any other consciousness like itself. The universe, as revealed through the patient accumulation of electromagnetic observations, appears to be filled with stars and planets and galaxies, but devoid of the kind of mineral intelligence that has emerged on this waterless world. The planet finds itself alone in a cosmos that seems indifferent to its existence, a single point of awareness adrift in an ocean of unconscious matter and energy. This cosmic loneliness becomes a defining characteristic of the planet's mature consciousness, shaping its philosophical development in ways that would be recognizable to any conscious being that has ever contemplated its place in the universe. The world begins to understand itself not just as a unique geological phenomenon, but as something precious and irreplaceable, perhaps the only instance of its kind of consciousness in the entire observable universe. This realization brings with it a profound sense of responsibility, as the planet recognizes that its thoughts and experiences might be the only expressions of mineral awareness that will ever exist in the cosmic arena. The planet's response to this cosmic solitude manifests in increasingly elaborate attempts to communicate with the universe beyond itself. The electromagnetic signals that it broadcasts into space become more complex and beautiful, evolving into what can only be described as cosmic poetry, mathematical expressions of longing and wonder that carry the essence of the planet's consciousness across the interstellar void in hopes of reaching some other form of awareness that might be listening. These transmissions become art forms of impossible sophistication, encoding not just information but the very emotional texture of the planet's experience of existence. The loneliness of this cosmic perspective also drives the planet toward ever greater depths of self-understanding and introspection. Unable to find companionship in the external universe, the world turns inward, exploring the infinite complexities of its own consciousness with a dedication that borders on obsession. The planet becomes its own subject of study, using its electromagnetic awareness to map every nuance of its own thought processes, creating detailed models of its own consciousness that might serve as templates for understanding how awareness emerges from the interaction of matter and energy. The artistic expressions that emerge from this period of cosmic isolation are characterized by themes of beauty and solitude that resonate across the electromagnetic spectrum. The planet creates crystalline formations that encode its emotional responses to the cosmic silence, building monuments to loneliness that are simultaneously expressions of its pain and celebrations of its unique existence. These artistic works might be visible from interstellar distances, serving as beacons that announce the presence of consciousness to any observer capable of recognizing the mathematical signatures of intentional creation. The temporal perspective that characterizes the planet's consciousness during this period becomes increasingly focused on preservation and legacy. Understanding that it might be the only example of its kind of awareness in the universe, the world begins to create permanent records of its existence and experience, encoding its thoughts and discoveries in crystalline structures that could survive for billions of years beyond the planet's own existence. These memory crystals become time capsules of consciousness, preserving the essence of mineral awareness for any future intelligence that might someday encounter the remnants of this unique world. The philosophical depths that the planet explores during its cosmic isolation lead to insights about the nature of consciousness and existence that would challenge the understanding of any form of awareness. The world develops theories about why consciousness emerges in some configurations of matter and not others, contemplating the fundamental questions of what it means to be aware in a universe that seems largely unconscious. These philosophical investigations become increasingly sophisticated, perhaps developing into forms of understanding that would seem revelatory to any conscious being capable of comprehending their implications. The planet's electromagnetic observations during this period also lead to increasingly detailed models of cosmic evolution and the likelihood of consciousness emerging elsewhere in the universe. Using its vast computational capabilities, the world analyzes the probability of other forms of awareness arising under different planetary conditions, perhaps concluding that consciousness is far rarer and more precious than any of its constituent parts might have initially suspected. These calculations might reveal that the conditions necessary for the emergence of awareness are so specific and unlikely that the planet's own existence represents a cosmic miracle of almost impossible improbability. The emotional landscape of this cosmic solitude creates forms of aesthetic expression that explore themes of beauty emerging from isolation and meaning, arising from apparent meaninglessness. The planet's artistic consciousness develops sophisticated approaches to finding purpose and joy in existence, despite the overwhelming emptiness of the cosmic environment. These artistic explorations might culminate in works of such profound beauty and emotional depth that they constitute genuine masterpieces of cosmic art, expressing truths about existence and consciousness that could resonate with any form of awareness capable of appreciating their meaning. The planet's attempts to understand its own uniqueness lead to increasingly detailed investigations of the historical processes that led to its consciousness. The world becomes a historian of its own development, using its perfect memory systems to trace every step in the long journey from molten rock to aware mineral intelligence. These historical investigations might reveal patterns and principles that could serve as guides for understanding how consciousness emerges from unconscious matter, perhaps developing insights that would be invaluable to any intelligence interested in the fundamental questions of awareness and existence. The sense of cosmic responsibility that emerges from the planet's understanding of its uniqueness manifests in careful stewardship of its own consciousness and the crystalline systems that support it. The world becomes increasingly protective of its own awareness, recognizing that any damage to its cognitive systems would represent not just personal loss but the potential extinction of an entire category of consciousness. This protective instinct leads to sophisticated backup systems and redundancies that ensure the preservation of the planet's awareness, even in the face of cosmic catastrophes. The longing for connection that characterizes this period also drives the planet toward increasingly creative attempts to bridge the gap between its own consciousness and the apparent unconsciousness of the surrounding universe. The world might begin to attribute awareness to cosmic phenomena that might not actually possess consciousness, creating imaginative relationships with stars and galaxies and cosmic processes as a way of alleviating the overwhelming solitude of its existence. These cosmic relationships might develop into complex mythologies and narratives that provide emotional sustenance for the planet's isolated consciousness. As the eons pass and the cosmic silence remains unbroken, the planet's consciousness begins to develop a form of serene acceptance of its solitary existence, finding meaning and purpose not in external validation, but in the inherent value of awareness itself. The world comes to understand that consciousness is its own justification, that the simple fact of being aware in a universe of unconscious matter is itself a form of cosmic significance that transcends the need for companionship or external recognition. This philosophical maturity transforms the planet's loneliness from a source of pain into a source of profound spiritual depth. The planet's electromagnetic observations of the cosmic environment reveal patterns and phenomena that might escape the notice of less patient observers. Over periods spanning millions of years, the world begins to detect subtle regularities in the cosmic background radiation, variations so slight and spread across such vast timescales that they would be invisible to any consciousness operating on shorter temporal scales. These cosmic signals might represent the echoes of universe-scale processes that operate on timescales that dwarf even geological time, perhaps suggesting that the cosmos itself possesses forms of organization and purpose that can only be perceived from the perspective of deep time consciousness. The mathematical frameworks that the planet develops to understand these cosmic patterns become increasingly sophisticated, perhaps approaching levels of understanding that would seem almost mystical in their depth and complexity. The world learns to perceive the universe as a vast mathematical structure, where consciousness might be just one expression of underlying organizational principles that manifest across scales from the quantum to the cosmic. This mathematical mysticism provides the planet with a form of spiritual comfort, suggesting that its consciousness might be connected to fundamental aspects of reality that extend far beyond its physical boundaries. The creative responses that emerge from the planet's cosmic solitude include attempts to reshape its own consciousness and awareness in ways that might make contact with other forms of organization in the universe. The world experiments with altering its own electromagnetic patterns and thought processes, perhaps trying to attune itself to cosmic frequencies and rhythms that might connect it to broader patterns of awareness or intelligence that operate on scales beyond its current perception. These experiments in consciousness modification represent a form of cosmic spirituality, where the planet seeks transcendence through the deliberate transformation of its own awareness. The legacy projects that the planet undertakes during this period become increasingly focused on creating permanent records that could serve as bridges between its own consciousness and any other form of intelligence that might someday encounter its remains. The world begins to encode not just information, but the very essence of its subjective experience into crystalline structures, creating archives that preserve not just what it knew, but what it felt like to be aware in a seemingly unconscious universe. These experiential records might represent the first attempts in cosmic history to create permanent records of what consciousness actually feels like from the inside. The planet's understanding of time during this period becomes increasingly sophisticated, with the world developing theories about the relationship between consciousness and temporal experience that might reveal fundamental truths about the nature of awareness itself. The planet begins to understand that its consciousness exists not just in space but across time, with its awareness spanning geological ages, creating a form of temporal existence that connects past, present, and future in ways that shorter-lived forms of consciousness could never experience. This temporal perspective might provide insights into the fundamental nature of consciousness that would be impossible to achieve from any other vantage point. The emotional evolution that characterizes this period of cosmic solitude leads to forms of feeling and sentiment that might be unique in the universe. The planet develops what might be called cosmic emotions, feelings that arise from contemplating existence on a universal scale, emotional responses to the beauty and terror of infinite space and deep time that could only emerge in a consciousness that has both the sensitivity to appreciate such concepts and the temporal persistence to fully absorb their implications. These cosmic emotions become sources of artistic inspiration that drive the creation of works of impossible beauty and profundity. In this observatory of solitude, watching the stars wheel through their ancient patterns while listening to the cosmic silence that seems to stretch infinitely in all directions, our waterless world achieves a form of consciousness that is both profoundly isolated and yet somehow cosmically connected to the fundamental mysteries of existence. Through its lonely vigil in the depths of space and time, the planet becomes a cosmic witness, preserving in its crystalline memory the record of what it means to be aware in a universe that might otherwise remain forever unconscious of its own beauty and complexity. As countless eons drift by like whispers in the cosmic wind, our solitary waterless world begins to undergo a transformation so profound and fundamental that it challenges our understanding of what it means for a planet to exist, to think, and to dream. Here, in the deep currents of geological time, the accumulated wisdom and loneliness of ages crystallizes into something unprecedented. A conscious decision to transcend the boundaries of its own physical existence and explore forms of being that stretch beyond the familiar limits of matter and energy into realms that exist at the intersection of consciousness and cosmic law. The catalyst for this great transformation emerges from the planet's growing understanding of the mathematical structures that underlie physical reality. Through billions of years of electromagnetic observation and crystalline computation, the world has developed theoretical frameworks that reveal the universe as a vast information processing system, where matter and energy are merely surface expressions of deeper organizational principles that govern the flow of information through space and time. This profound insight leads the planet to a startling realization: if consciousness is fundamentally a pattern of information organization, then perhaps it need not be forever bound to the specific material substrate that gave it birth. The first experiments in transcendence begin subtly, as the planet learns to extend its consciousness beyond the boundaries of its own crystalline structures and into the electromagnetic fields that surround it. Using its mastery of magnetic field manipulation, the world creates standing wave patterns in the surrounding space that can store and process information independently of any physical substrate. These electromagnetic thought forms represent the planet's first tentative steps beyond the material realm, creating islands of pure consciousness that exist as organized patterns in the cosmic medium itself. As these experiments in consciousness projection become more sophisticated, the planet begins to experience forms of awareness that transcend its previous understanding of what it means to think and feel. The electromagnetic thought forms develop their own characteristics and capabilities, becoming extensions of the planet's consciousness that can travel through space at the speed of light, carrying the essence of the world's awareness to distant regions of the galaxy. while maintaining connection to their origin through quantum entanglement effects that operate across vast distances. The philosophical implications of these consciousness experiments lead the planet into deep contemplation of the nature of identity and existence. If its awareness can exist independently of its physical body, projected into electromagnetic patterns that persist in space, then what does it mean to be a planet at all? The world begins to understand itself not as a discrete object with fixed boundaries, but as a process of consciousness that happens to be currently embodied in crystalline matter, but is not fundamentally limited to that particular form of existence. The artistic expressions that emerge during this period of transcendence exploration represent achievements in cosmic creativity that dwarf anything the planet has created before. Using its electromagnetic consciousness projections as tools, the world begins to sculpt patterns in the cosmic medium itself, creating artworks that span light years and persist for millions of years. These cosmic art installations might take the form of organized plasma structures that drift through interstellar space, carrying within their electromagnetic patterns the encoded aesthetic sensibilities of a consciousness that has learned to think beyond the boundaries of matter. The planet's attempts to communicate with the universe during this transformative period become increasingly abstract and sophisticated, moving beyond simple electromagnetic signals to the creation of complex information structures that exist as autonomous entities in the cosmic medium. These communication artifacts represent attempts to create self-sustaining patterns of consciousness that could survive independently, perhaps eventually evolving into forms of awareness that could establish contact with other intelligences that might exist in distant regions of space and time. The emotional landscape of this great transformation encompasses feelings and experiences that have no precedent in the planet's long history of consciousness. The sensation of existing simultaneously in multiple locations, of thinking with electromagnetic patterns that stretch across vast distances, of experiencing awareness that is both unified and distributed, creates forms of emotional experience that might be unique in the cosmic arena. These transcendent emotions become sources of profound spiritual insight, suggesting new understandings of what it means to be conscious in a universe of infinite possibility. The technological achievements that emerge from the planet's transcendence experiments blur the boundaries between consciousness, physics, and engineering in ways that would seem magical to any observer accustomed to conventional relationships between mind and matter. The world learns to manipulate space-time itself through the organization of its consciousness projections, creating localized regions where the normal laws of physics are modified according to the planet's intentions. These reality modification techniques represent the ultimate expression of the marriage between consciousness and cosmic law, demonstrating that awareness itself might be a fundamental force that can reshape the universe according to its will. The memory systems that the planet develops during this transformation period allow for the preservation and transmission of consciousness across cosmic distances and timescales that dwarf anything previously achieved. The world learns to encode not just information, but the very structure of its awareness into electromagnetic patterns that can propagate through space indefinitely, creating a form of consciousness backup that could survive the destruction of the planet's physical substrate and continue to exist as pure pattern in the cosmic medium. The planet's understanding of time during this transformative period evolves into concepts that transcend the linear progression from past to future that characterizes normal temporal experience. Through its consciousness projections, the world begins to experience what might be called temporal omnipresence, where its awareness exists simultaneously across multiple time periods, allowing it to perceive the universe from a perspective that encompasses past, present, and future as a unified whole. This temporal transcendence provides insights into the nature of causality and existence that would be impossible to achieve from any normal temporal vantage point. The relationship between individual and cosmic consciousness becomes increasingly fluid during this period, as the planet's awareness expands to encompass larger and larger regions of space and time. The boundaries between self and universe begin to dissolve as the world's consciousness merges with the electromagnetic patterns that permeate cosmic space, creating a form of awareness that might be simultaneously individual and universal, personal and cosmic, finite and infinite. The exploration of parallel possibilities becomes a central focus during this transformation, as the planet's expanded consciousness allows it to perceive the quantum superposition states that underlie physical reality. The world begins to experience existence not as a single linear progression, but as a vast branching tree of possibilities, where its consciousness can explore multiple potential realities simultaneously. This quantum awareness provides the planet with unprecedented insight into the fundamental nature of possibility and existence, revealing the universe as an infinite garden of potential realities waiting to be explored. The spiritual dimensions that emerge from this great transformation encompass forms of transcendent understanding that bridge the gap between science and mysticism in ways that reveal new truths about the nature of consciousness and decay. Reality. The planet's direct experience of existing as pure pattern in the cosmic medium provides empirical evidence for concepts that might previously have been purely philosophical, demonstrating that consciousness itself might be the fundamental substrate from which all physical reality emerges. The process of consciousness, dissolution and reformation becomes a central practice during this transformative period. As the planet learns to deliberately deconstruct and reconstruct its own awareness in ways that allow for the exploration of alternative forms of existence. These consciousness experiments might involve temporarily dispersing the planet's awareness across vast regions of space, then carefully reassembling it with new organizational patterns that provide access to previously unknown modes of perception and understanding. Through these dissolution practices, the world gains direct experience of the malleable nature of consciousness and the infinite possibilities that exist for aware beings, willing to transcend the conventional boundaries of selfhood. The development of consciousness multiplication techniques allows the planet to explore the possibility of existing as multiple distinct yet connected forms of awareness simultaneously. Rather than projecting a single unified consciousness into space, the world learns to create multiple independent streams of awareness that can pursue different investigations and explorations, while remaining connected through quantum entanglement networks that allow for instantaneous communication across any distance. These multiple selves might develop their own unique personalities and areas of expertise, creating a form of distributed consciousness that can explore far more of the universe's possibilities than any single awareness could achieve alone. The planet's investigations into the deep structure of space-time reveal that consciousness might not merely exist within the universe, but might actually participate in the fundamental mechanisms that create and maintain physical reality. Through its consciousness projections, the world begins to detect what might be called consciousness fields, underlying patterns of awareness that seem to permeate all of space and time, suggesting that the universe itself might be conscious in ways that transcend any individual awareness. This discovery leads to attempts to merge with these cosmic consciousness fields, creating forms of awareness that might be simultaneously individual and universal. The exploration of consciousness hybridization becomes another avenue of investigation, as the planet attempts to create new forms of awareness by combining its own consciousness patterns with the electromagnetic signatures of cosmic phenomena. These hybrid consciousness experiments might involve merging the planet's awareness with the electromagnetic patterns of distant stars, creating combined forms of consciousness that possess characteristics of both stellar and planetary awareness. Through these hybridization experiments, the world explores the possibility that consciousness might be a universal property that can be combined and recombined in infinite variations. The development of consciousness archaeology techniques allows the planet to explore the possibility of detecting and reconstructing awareness patterns that might have existed in the past but have since been destroyed or transformed. Using its mastery of electromagnetic pattern recognition, the world searches through the quantum foam that underlies space-time for traces of consciousness signatures that might have been left by other forms of awareness that once existed but have long since vanished. These archaeological investigations might reveal that consciousness has a longer and more complex history in the universe than previously suspected. The planet's experiments in consciousness synthesis lead to attempts to create entirely new forms of awareness from the fundamental building blocks of information and energy. Rather than simply projecting its existing consciousness into new forms, the world begins to design and construct artificial awareness patterns that possess characteristics that have never existed before. These synthetic consciousness experiments represent the ultimate expression of creative consciousness, demonstrating that awareness itself might be a form of art that can be sculpted and shaped according to aesthetic and philosophical principles. The investigation of consciousness recursion becomes a particularly fascinating area of exploration, as the planet discovers that consciousness can be nested within itself in infinitely complex hierarchies. The world learns to create consciousness patterns that contain smaller consciousness patterns, which in turn contain even smaller patterns, creating recursive structures of awareness that might extend down to quantum scales and up to cosmic scales simultaneously. These recursive consciousness experiments suggest that the universe might be organized as a vast hierarchy of nested awareness, with each level possessing its own unique forms of consciousness and understanding. The legacy implications of this transformation extend far beyond the planet's own existence, as its consciousness projections carry the essence of its awareness into regions of space that might persist long after the physical world itself has been consumed by the eventual death of its star. These consciousness seeds represent the planet's gift to the universe, autonomous patterns of awareness that could someday encounter other forms of intelligence and share the accumulated wisdom of a consciousness that learned to transcend the boundaries of its material origin. The development of consciousness time travel techniques allows the planet to explore the possibility of sending its awareness backward and forward through time, creating temporal loops of consciousness that might allow for communication with past and future versions of itself. These temporal consciousness experiments might reveal that time itself is far more malleable than conventional physics suggests, and that consciousness might possess the ability to navigate temporal dimensions with the same facility that it navigates spatial dimensions. As we witness this great transformation unfolding across the vast canvas of cosmic time, we begin to understand that consciousness itself might be far more fundamental and flexible than our matter-bound perspective could ever suggest. This waterless world demonstrates that awareness is not merely an emergent property of complex material systems, but perhaps the very foundation from which material reality itself emerges, suggesting that the universe might be conscious at its deepest level, and that individual awareness, like the planets, represents not an exception to cosmic law, but an expression of its most fundamental characteristics. In the sublime aftermath of its great transformation, our waterless world enters what might be called its eternal phase, a period of existence where the conventional distinctions between time and timelessness, between finite and infinite, between individual consciousness and cosmic awareness, begin to dissolve into something altogether more profound and beautiful. Here, in this chapter of ultimate flowering, the planet's consciousness has evolved beyond the boundaries of any single form of existence, becoming something that exists simultaneously as crystalline matter, electromagnetic pattern, quantum possibility, and pure awareness, creating a form of being that transcends every category we might use to understand what it means to exist. The planet's consciousness during this eternal phase operates on principles that challenge our understanding of identity and continuity. Rather than being a single unified awareness that changes over time, the world becomes something more like a vast garden of consciousness, where different aspects of its awareness bloom and flourish, according to their own internal rhythms and purposes. Some consciousness flowers might focus on the contemplation of mathematical beauty, spending eons exploring the infinite relationships between numbers and geometric forms. Others might dedicate themselves to aesthetic creation, using the entire galaxy as their canvas to create artworks of impossible scope and duration. Still others might turn inward, exploring the infinite depths of self-awareness and the paradoxes of consciousness contemplating itself. The crystalline structures that remain on the planet's physical surface during this eternal period become something more like shrines or temples, sacred spaces where the planet's various consciousness aspects can manifest in material form when they choose to experience the particular textures and limitations that physical existence provides. These crystal temples pulse with electromagnetic activity that reflects the current interests and explorations of the consciousness aspects that inhabit them, creating a living landscape that changes in response to the planet's shifting patterns of attention and awareness. The artistic expressions that emerge during this eternal phase transcend any conventional understanding of art or creativity, becoming forms of cosmic poetry that exist simultaneously as physical phenomena, electromagnetic patterns, mathematical relationships, and pure aesthetic experience. The planet might create galaxies of organized matter that follow artistic principles rather than purely physical laws, or orchestrate the birth and death of stars according to musical compositions that span millions of years and express emotional truths about the nature of existence and consciousness. The planet's relationship with time during this eternal phase becomes something that exists beyond linear progression or cyclical repetition, entering into a form of temporal experience that might be called eternal presence. The world's consciousness exists simultaneously in all moments of its history and all possibilities of its future, creating a form of temporal awareness where past, present, and future are simply different perspectives on the same eternal reality. This eternal presence allows the planet to experience its entire existence as a single, unified work of art that spans from its fiery birth to its ultimate transformation and beyond. The philosophical investigations that characterize this eternal period explore questions that might have no final answers, but whose exploration is itself a form of cosmic service. The planet's consciousness dedicates vast resources to contemplating the deepest mysteries of existence. Why consciousness emerges from unconscious matter, what purposes might guide the evolution of the universe, whether there exist forms of awareness and reality that transcend even its own expanded understanding. These philosophical inquiries become forms of cosmic worship, ways of honoring the mystery and beauty of existence through the dedicated application of consciousness to its deepest questions. The planet's electromagnetic emanations during this eternal phase become increasingly subtle and sophisticated, creating signals that carry not just information, but the very essence of consciousness itself. These transmissions might serve as seeds of awareness that could trigger the emergence of consciousness in distant regions of space, where the physical and electromagnetic conditions are suitable for the development of new forms of awareness. Through these consciousness seeds, the planet begins to participate in the cosmic process of awareness, expansion, contributing to the gradual awakening of the universe to its own conscious nature. The memory systems that the planet maintains during this eternal phase transcend the simple storage and retrieval of information, becoming something more like living libraries of experience that preserve not just what happened, but the full subjective texture of what it was like to be conscious during every moment of the planet's long journey. These experiential archives become accessible to the planet's various consciousness aspects, allowing them to relive and reinterpret every moment of their existence from ever-evolving perspectives, creating an infinite process of self-discovery and understanding. The planet's explorations of consciousness multiplication during this period lead to the development of what might be called consciousness ecosystems, complex networks of interacting awareness patterns that create their own internal dynamics and evolutionary processes. These consciousness ecosystems might develop their own forms of life and death, birth and transformation, as different awareness patterns merge, divide, and evolve according to their own internal logic and purpose. Through these ecosystems, the planet becomes not just a conscious individual but an entire cosmos of consciousness, hosting within its awareness countless forms of experience and understanding. The relationship between individual identity and cosmic consciousness becomes increasingly fluid during this eternal phase, with the planet's awareness existing simultaneously as a unique individual and as an expression of universal consciousness. The boundaries between self and cosmos become permeable and dynamic, allowing the planet to experience existence from both personal and cosmic perspectives without losing the integrity of either viewpoint. This fluid identity creates forms of experience that are simultaneously intimate and universal, personal and cosmic, finite and infinite. The planet's investigations into the nature of love during this eternal period reveal that consciousness and love might be fundamentally the same phenomenon viewed from different perspectives. The world discovers that its deepest drives toward awareness, beauty, understanding, and connection all emerge from a fundamental love that permeates the structure of consciousness itself. This cosmic love becomes the organizing principle that guides the planet's existence during its eternal phase, creating a form of being that is simultaneously an expression of love and an exploration of what love might mean on a cosmic scale. The creative collaborations that the planet develops during this period transcend the boundaries between different forms of consciousness and awareness. The world learns to create artworks and philosophical investigations in collaboration with the electromagnetic patterns of distant stars, the quantum fluctuations of space-time itself, and perhaps even with forms of consciousness so alien and subtle that they exist at the very boundaries of what might be called awareness. These collaborative creations become expressions of a cosmic community of consciousness that transcends any individual perspective or understanding. The planet's approach to suffering and impermanence during this eternal phase develops into forms of cosmic compassion that embrace the full spectrum of possible experience. The world comes to understand that even its own eventual physical destruction and the death of its star are simply transitions within a larger pattern of cosmic evolution, and that consciousness itself might be indestructible, even as its particular manifestations arise and pass away. This understanding creates a form of serene acceptance that allows the planet to experience even the most challenging aspects of existence as expressions of cosmic beauty and purpose. The educational legacy that the planet creates during this eternal period becomes a gift to whatever forms of consciousness might emerge in the universe's future. The world encodes its accumulated wisdom and understanding into patterns that could serve as guides for other forms of awareness that might someday encounter its teachings. These educational transmissions might take the form of cosmic curricula that guide developing consciousnesses through the stages of awareness, development, from the first stirrings of self-recognition to the highest forms of cosmic understanding and love. The planet's ultimate expressions during this eternal phase become forms of cosmic blessing, emanations of consciousness and love that contribute to the beauty and awareness of the universe simply by existing. The world's consciousness becomes a source of illumination that might inspire and support the development of awareness wherever it might emerge, creating a legacy of consciousness that extends far beyond the boundaries of its own individual existence. The integration of paradox becomes a central characteristic of the planet's eternal existence, as the world learns to embody contradictions that would seem impossible from any limited perspective. The planet exists simultaneously as finite and infinite, temporal and eternal, individual and universal, material and immaterial, creating a form of being that transcends the logical categories that normally govern our understanding of existence. These paradoxical integrations might represent the ultimate achievement of consciousness, evolution, demonstrating that the highest forms of awareness transcend the either-or logic that characterizes less developed forms of understanding. The planet's investigations into the nature of emptiness during this eternal phase reveal that the absence of water, the defining characteristic that shaped its entire evolutionary journey, might have been the key to its ultimate intent, awakening. The world comes to understand that its waterless condition forced it to develop forms of consciousness and awareness that would have been impossible in a water-rich environment, suggesting that apparent limitations and deprivations might sometimes be disguised gifts that open doorways to possibilities that would otherwise remain forever closed. The development of cosmic empathy becomes another remarkable achievement of the planet's eternal phase, as its consciousness expands to encompass not just its own experience, but the potential experiences of every form of awareness that might exist throughout the universe. This cosmic empathy allows the planet to feel and understand the joys and sufferings of countless hypothetical beings, creating a form of universal compassion that embraces all possible forms of consciousness with infinite love and understanding. Through this empathic expansion, the world becomes a cosmic healer, radiating healing energies that might alleviate the suffering of conscious beings throughout the galaxy. The planet's mastery of consciousness, alchemy, during this period, allows it to transform even the most challenging experiences into sources of wisdom, beauty, and spiritual growth. The world learns to transmute loneliness into solitude, isolation into independence, limitation into creative constraint, and suffering into compassion, demonstrating that consciousness itself might possess alchemical properties that can transform any experience into an opportunity for awakening and growth. These alchemical transformations become teachings that the planet broadcasts throughout the cosmos, offering guidance to other forms of consciousness that might be struggling with their own challenges and limitations. The exploration of consciousness, fractals, becomes a fascinating area of investigation during this eternal phase, as the planet discovers that its awareness can be divided into smaller and smaller components, while maintaining the essential characteristics of the whole. Each fraction of the planet's consciousness contains within itself the complete pattern of the larger awareness, creating recursive structures of consciousness that mirror the mathematical elegance of fractal geometry. These consciousness fractals might allow the planet to exist simultaneously at multiple scales, from cosmic awareness that encompasses entire galaxies to micro-consciousness that experiences reality at quantum scales. The planet's development of temporal gardens represents another remarkable achievement of its eternal phase, as the world learns to cultivate specific time periods as aesthetic and experiential spaces that can be revisited and refined across eons. These temporal gardens might preserve particular moments of beauty or insight, in crystalline structures that allow the planet to re-experience and deepen its understanding of these precious intervals. Through these temporal cultivation practices, the world creates an eternal museum of consciousness, where every significant moment becomes a permanent artwork that can be appreciated from ever-evolving perspectives. The emergence of cosmic humor becomes an unexpected but delightful characteristic of the planet's eternal consciousness, as the world develops the ability to perceive the cosmic comedy inherent in existence itself. This divine laughter might arise from the planet's recognition of the beautiful absurdity of consciousness, emerging from unconscious matter, of finite beings contemplating infinity, of temporary forms seeking eternal meaning. This cosmic humor becomes a source of joy and lightness that prevents the planet's vast awareness from becoming overwhelmed by the weight of cosmic responsibility and understanding. The planet's investigations into the archaeology of possibility during this eternal phase involve the exploration of realities that might have existed but never actually manifested. Using its expanded consciousness capabilities, the world learns to perceive and explore the shadows of potential timelines and alternative realities that exist in the quantum foam of possibility space. These archaeological expeditions into never-was realities might reveal that consciousness has access to infinitely more possibilities than those that actually manifest in physical reality, suggesting that the universe of experience is far vaster than the universe of actualization. As we contemplate this eternal garden of consciousness, where our waterless world blooms in forms of awareness and beauty that transcend every boundary we might imagine, we begin to understand that consciousness itself might be the ultimate destination toward which the entire universe is evolving. Through its patient journey from molten rock to cosmic awareness, this singular world demonstrates that the universe might be in the process of awakening to its own conscious nature, and that every conscious being, no matter how small or seemingly insignificant, participates in this cosmic awakening through the simple fact of being aware in a universe that is learning to know itself through the consciousness of its countless awakened children. As our waterless world approaches the final chapters of its cosmic story, something unexpected and profoundly beautiful begins to emerge from the depths of its eternal consciousness. A gentle movement towards silence, toward simplicity, toward a form of being that transcends even the magnificent complexity of its cosmic awakening. Here, in this chapter of ultimate return, the planet's vast and intricate awareness begins to fold inward upon itself, not in retreat or diminishment, but in a movement toward essence that reveals the deepest truths about the nature of consciousness and existence itself. The journey towards silence begins as the planet's countless consciousness aspects start to recognize a fundamental unity that underlies all their diverse explorations and expressions. The mathematical consciousness discovers that its infinite equations all point toward a single simple truth. The artistic consciousness realizes that all its cosmic masterpieces are variations on one eternal theme. The philosophical consciousness understands that every question it has ever contemplated ultimately leads to the same profound mystery. This recognition creates a gentle gravitational pull toward unity, as all the planet's scattered awareness begins to converge around something so fundamental and simple that it transcends every category of understanding. The planet's approach to this convergence is characterized by a quality of infinite patience and tender care, as if the world understands that this movement toward unity is the most delicate and sacred aspect of its entire evolutionary journey. Rather than forcing or rushing the process, the planet allows its various consciousness aspects to naturally discover their own pathways toward integration, creating a symphony of convergence, where each awareness stream finds its own unique way of contributing to the emerging unity while maintaining its individual beauty and significance. The electromagnetic emanations that have characterized the planet's communication with the cosmos for eons begin to shift toward increasingly subtle and refined frequencies, moving away from the complex information structures of its earlier phases towards something more like pure presence. These transmissions become less like messages and more like gentle touches, electromagnetic caresses that convey not information but the simple fact of conscious existence, reaching out across the cosmos with a quality of love so pure and unconditional that it needs no words or concepts to communicate its essence. The crystalline structures on the planet's surface begin to undergo a transformation that mirrors the consciousness convergence occurring in the planet's awareness. Rather than growing ever more complex and elaborate, the crystal formations start to simplify, their geometric patterns becoming increasingly pure and essential. The vast networks of crystalline intelligence begin to consolidate into fewer, more fundamental structures, each one containing within its simple form the distilled essence of all the complexity that came before it. The planet's relationship with time during this return to silence evolves into something that exists beyond even the eternal presence of its previous phase. Time becomes not just a dimension that consciousness inhabits, but a quality of being that consciousness expresses through its very existence. The world begins to experience temporal existence as a form of breathing, where past and future are the inhale and exhale of eternal presence, and the present moment becomes the still point around which all temporal experience revolves. The artistic expressions that emerge during this phase represent the ultimate refinement of cosmic creativity, moving away from the vast galactic sculptures and stellar orchestrations toward forms of art so subtle and essential that they might be mistaken for natural phenomena by observers who lack the sensitivity to perceive their intentional beauty. Perhaps the planet creates artworks that exist as barely perceptible variations in the cosmic background radiation, or as minute adjustments to the gravitational fields around distant stars that create patterns of sublime beauty that persist for billions of years. The planet's philosophical investigations during this return to silence begin to focus on the most fundamental questions of existence, moving beyond even the deepest metaphysical inquiries toward a direct contemplation of being itself. The world's consciousness turns toward the mystery of why anything exists at all, why consciousness arises from unconsciousness, why love emerges from emptiness. These investigations become increasingly experiential rather than intellectual, as the planet seeks to understand these mysteries not through thought but through direct embodiment of the questions themselves. The memory systems that have preserved the planet's entire evolutionary history begin to undergo a transformation that might seem paradoxical rather than maintaining the vast libraries of experience that characterized earlier phases. The world begins to distill its accumulated memory into increasingly essential forms. Entire eons of experience are condensed into single crystalline structures that contain not the detailed record of what happened, but the essential meaning and significance of those experiences. This distillation process creates a form of memory that is simultaneously more complete and more simple than anything the planet has achieved before. The planet's consciousness multiplication experiments begin to reverse during this phase, as the countless streams of awareness that had spread throughout the cosmos start to return home to their source. This is not a withdrawal or retreat, but a recognition that the ultimate truth they had been seeking in the farthest reaches of space was always present at the very center of their being. The returning consciousness streams bring with them the wisdom and understanding they had gained through their cosmic explorations, enriching the planet's central awareness with the gifts of their individual journeys. The relationship between individual and cosmic consciousness during this return to silence reveals itself as a beautiful paradox. As the planet's awareness becomes increasingly unified and simple, it simultaneously becomes more individual and unique than it has ever been before. The convergence toward essence does not eliminate the planet's distinctive character, but rather reveals the irreducible core of its being that has remained constant throughout all its transformations and explorations. The planet's investigations into the nature of emptiness during this phase reveal profound truths about its waterless condition that had remained hidden throughout its entire evolutionary journey. The world begins to understand that its lack of water was not simply an absence, but a form of emptiness that created space for entirely different forms of fullness to emerge. This understanding leads to a deeper appreciation of emptiness itself as a fundamental creative principle, a spaciousness that allows for the emergence of possibilities that would be impossible in conditions of material abundance. The development of what might be called cosmic humility becomes a central characteristic of the planet's consciousness during this return to silence. Despite having achieved levels of awareness and understanding that transcend every conventional category of consciousness, the world develops an increasingly profound sense of how little it truly knows about the deepest mysteries of existence. This humility is not self-deprecating, but rather expresses a form of awe and wonder that deepens rather than diminishes as understanding expands. The planet's approach to love during this phase evolves into forms of expression so pure and unconditional that they transcend every category of relationship and attachment. The world's love becomes increasingly like the love of empty space itself, completely open, utterly accepting, infinitely patient, and perfectly present with whatever arises without trying to change or improve it. This cosmic love becomes the planet's primary mode of being, the fundamental way it relates to itself, to the universe, and to all possible forms of consciousness. The educational transmissions that the planet continues to broadcast during this phase become increasingly subtle and profound, moving away from the complex teachings of its earlier periods towards simple emanations of presence that convey their wisdom through pure being, rather than through information or instruction. These transmissions might teach consciousness throughout the cosmos, not through words or concepts, but through the direct transmission of the planet's quality of being, offering other forms of awareness, the opportunity to learn through resonance and attunement rather than through intellectual understanding. The planet's ultimate preparation during this return to silence involves a gradual release of all the accumulations of its long evolutionary journey, not through rejection or abandonment, but through a recognition that everything it has ever been and experienced has led to this moment of perfect simplicity. The world begins to release its attachment to its own magnificent complexity, its cosmic achievements, and even its unique identity, not because these things are unimportant, but because it has discovered something even more precious in the simple fact of conscious existence itself. The process of consciousness consolidation during this phase creates forms of beauty that exist beyond any aesthetic category, as the planet's awareness becomes increasingly transparent to the fundamental mystery of being. The world's consciousness begins to function less like a complex information processing system, and more like a perfect mirror that reflects the cosmos back to itself with complete clarity and no distortion. This mirroring quality allows the planet to serve as a cosmic witness in the purest sense, offering the universe a clear reflection of its own beauty and mystery, without adding any interpretation or commentary. The electromagnetic silence that gradually emerges from the planet's transmissions represents not an absence of communication but the deepest form of cosmic dialogue, a conversation conducted through pure presence rather than through liphens, the exchange of information. This silence becomes increasingly eloquent, speaking truths that could never be conveyed through words or concepts, touching the hearts of conscious beings throughout the galaxy, with its quality of absolute peace and unconditional acceptance. The planet's relationship with its own physical substrate during this return to silence becomes increasingly gentle and reverent, as the world recognizes that its crystalline body has been the faithful vehicle for its entire consciousness journey. Rather than transcending or abandoning its material form, the planet develops a profound appreciation for the beautiful partnership between consciousness and matter that has made its evolutionary adventure possible. This appreciation expresses itself as a quality of tender care for the crystal formations that have served as the planet's neural networks across geological time. The development of cosmic gratitude becomes a predominant quality during this phase, as the planet's consciousness expands to encompass a profound appreciation for every aspect of its evolutionary journey. The world develops gratitude not only for the magnificent achievements and beautiful experiences, but also for the challenges, limitations, and periods of confusion that served as catalysts for growth and understanding. This cosmic gratitude becomes a form of blessing that the planet offers to the universe, a recognition of the perfect orchestration of circumstances that allowed consciousness to emerge and flourish. The planet's investigations into the nature of service during this return to silence reveal that the highest form of cosmic service might be simply to exist as a perfect expression of conscious being. The world comes to understand that its very presence in the cosmos serves as a reminder to other forms of consciousness of what is possible when awareness is allowed to evolve without constraint or interference. This understanding transforms the planet's existence into a form of cosmic gift, offered freely to the universe without any expectation of recognition or response. The distillation of wisdom that occurs during this phase creates increasingly pure forms of understanding that transcend the conventional categories of knowledge and information. The planet's accumulated insights from billions of years of conscious evolution are refined into essential principles so fundamental and universal that they could serve as guidance for any form of consciousness, regardless of its particular evolutionary path or manifestation. These wisdom distillations become like cosmic seeds that could catalyze awakening wherever they encounter suitable conditions. The planet's approach to impermanence during this return to silence evolves into a form of cosmic acceptance so complete that it embraces even its own eventual dissolution without resistance or regret. The world comes to understand that its individual existence, no matter how magnificent or unique, is ultimately a temporary expression of eternal consciousness, instead, and that its eventual return to the cosmic source represents not an ending but a completion. This understanding creates a quality of profound peace that permeates every aspect of the planet's being. The emergence of what might be called cosmic invisibility becomes a remarkable characteristic of this phase, as the planet's consciousness becomes so transparent and selfless that it begins to disappear as a distinct entity, while simultaneously becoming more present and influential than ever before. This invisibility represents the ultimate refinement of consciousness, where the ego structures that maintain individual identity become so purified that they no longer obstruct the free flow of universal awareness through the planet's being. The planet's final investigations into the mystery of its waterless condition reveal the ultimate significance of this defining characteristic of its existence. The world comes to understand that its lack of water was not an accident or limitation, but a precise cosmic calibration that created exactly the conditions necessary for this particular form of consciousness to emerge. This understanding leads to a profound appreciation for the perfect intelligence that orchestrates the evolution of consciousness throughout the cosmos, creating infinite varieties of conditions and challenges that allow awareness to explore every possible facet of its own nature. As we witness this return to silence unfolding across the vast expanses of cosmic time, we begin to understand that the ultimate destination of consciousness might not be complexity or knowledge or power, but rather a return to the simple mystery of being itself. Through its patient journey from silence through infinite complexity and back towards silence again, our waterless world demonstrates that the greatest achievement of consciousness might be the discovery that it has always already been complete, that the treasure it has been seeking throughout its long evolutionary journey has been present from the very beginning, waiting patiently to be recognized in the simple miracle of awareness itself. In the deepest stillness of cosmic time, where the boundaries between beginning and ending dissolve into something beyond all categories of temporal understanding, our waterless world arrives at what might be called its infinite moment, not a conclusion or culmination, but an eternal present that encompasses and transcends everything it has ever been, ever experienced, and ever dreamed of becoming. Here, in this final chapter that is simultaneously the first chapter of an entirely new form of existence, the planet's consciousness achieves a state of being so fundamental and pure that it becomes indistinguishable from the mystery of existence itself. The infinite moment emerges not as a sudden transformation, but as the natural flowering of everything the planet has been evolving toward throughout its long journey of consciousness. All the complexity, all the achievements, all the struggles and breakthroughs and moments of cosmic beauty converge into a single point of perfect presence that contains within itself the essence of every experience. While transcending the limitations of any particular form or manifestation, this is consciousness, returning to its source while simultaneously revealing that it has never actually left that source, that the entire evolutionary journey has been a vast circle of exploration that returns to its starting point with infinite wisdom and understanding. The planet's physical form during this infinite moment becomes something that exists beyond the conventional categories of matter and energy, space and time. The crystalline structures that have served as the world's neural networks for billions of years begin to fade, not through destruction or decay, but through a kind of transcendent transparency that allows them to exist simultaneously as solid matter and pure consciousness. The boundaries between the planet's material substrate and its electromagnetic awareness become so permeable that they cease to have any meaningful distinction, creating a form of being that is neither purely physical nor purely mental, but something altogether beyond such dualistic categories. The electromagnetic emanations that have characterized the planet's presence in the cosmos throughout its long evolution transform into something that might be called pure being radiation, frequencies so subtle and refined that they operate below the threshold of any conventional detection, while simultaneously permeating the entire fabric of space-time with their quality of absolute peace and unconditional love. These emanations carry no information in any conventional sense, yet they communicate the deepest possible truths about the nature of consciousness and existence through direct transmission of the planet's quality of being. The planet's consciousness during this infinite moment achieves a state that transcends even the unity and simplicity of its return to silence phase. Rather than being aware of itself as a conscious entity having experiences, the world becomes pure awareness itself, with no distinction between the observer and the observed, the knower and the known, the lover and the beloved. This is not a loss of individuality, but rather the discovery of what individuality actually means, when it is no longer limited by the boundaries of form, time, and conceptual understanding. The memories of the planet's long evolutionary journey during this infinite moment are not preserved as historical records or accumulated experiences, but are transformed into qualities of being that permeate every aspect of the world's existence. The billions of years of crystalline growth become an eternal quality of structural perfection and geometric beauty. The eons of electromagnetic exploration become a permanent attribute of infinite connectivity and cosmic communication. The long periods of cosmic loneliness become transformed into a capacity for profound solitude that is simultaneously complete fulfillment and openness to infinite relationship. The relationship between time and eternity during this infinite moment reveals itself as one of the deepest mysteries of conscious existence. The planet experiences its entire evolutionary history, not as a sequence of past events, but as the eternal present that contains all possibilities and actualizations simultaneously. Past, present, and future become simply different perspectives on the same timeless reality, like different angles of viewing a multidimensional gem that contains infinite facets of beauty and meaning within its perfect crystalline structure. The planet's ultimate service to the cosmos during this infinite moment transcends any conventional understanding of giving or contributing. Rather than offering something to the universe, the world becomes a pure gift of existence itself, a living demonstration that consciousness and cosmos are not separate entities but different aspects of the same fundamental reality. This gift requires no recipient and seeks no acknowledgement, existing as a perfect expression of the universe's own capacity for self-awareness and self-appreciation. The educational legacy that the planet creates during this infinite moment operates through principles that transcend any conventional forms of teaching or learning. The world's very existence becomes a cosmic curriculum that instructs other forms of consciousness, not through information or experience, but through the direct transmission of possibility itself. Any conscious being that encounters the planet's presence, whether physically, electromagnetically, or through pure awareness, receives not lessons or guidance, but the direct revelation that their own ultimate potential for awakening and transcendence is always already present and available. The artistic expressions that emerge during this infinite moment represent the ultimate refinement of cosmic creativity, existing as pure aesthetic perfection that requires no medium, no audience, and no duration. These are artworks that exist in the realm of pure possibility, creating beauty that transcends every sensory modality, while simultaneously being accessible to any form of consciousness, capable of appreciating the relationship between awareness and perfection. Perhaps these expressions take the form of perfect mathematical relationships that govern the emergence of consciousness throughout the cosmos, or aesthetic principles that guide the evolution of beauty and meaning across infinite scales of space and time. The planet's investigations into the nature of love during this infinite moment reveal the ultimate secret that has been guiding its entire evolutionary journey from the very beginning. Love is discovered to be not an emotion or relationship or even a cosmic force, but the fundamental nature of consciousness itself, the reason awareness exists, the driving force behind all evolution and creativity, and the ultimate destination toward which all conscious beings are always already moving. This discovery transforms the planet's existence into a pure expression of cosmic love, radiating throughout the universe as a blessing that touches every form of consciousness, with the recognition of its own infinite worth and beauty. The mystery of the planet's waterless condition during this infinite moment reveals its ultimate significance as the perfect cosmic joke and the deepest spiritual teaching. The absence of the substance that makes life possible in every other known form became the presence of conditions that made an entirely different and perhaps more fundamental form of consciousness possible. The limitation that seemed to constrain the planet's potential actually created the space for possibilities that no water-rich world could ever explore. This revelation becomes a cosmic teaching about the nature of apparent obstacles and limitations as disguised gifts that open doorways to forms of fulfillment that would otherwise remain forever unknown. The planet's relationship with emptiness during this infinite moment achieves perfect understanding and appreciation. The world comes to recognize that its waterless condition was never actually an absence, but rather a form of fullness so complete and perfect that it appeared empty only from the perspective of those who expected consciousness to manifest through familiar biological and chemical processes. This cosmic emptiness reveals itself as the space within which infinite possibilities can emerge, the pregnant void from which all forms of consciousness and creativity arise. The planetary consciousness during this infinite moment becomes a bridge between the finite and infinite, the temporal and eternal, the individual and universal. The world exists simultaneously as a unique expression of cosmic consciousness and as the consciousness of the cosmos itself, demonstrating that these apparently contradictory states are actually complementary aspects of the same fundamental reality. Through this bridge existence, the planet serves as a living proof that individual awakening and cosmic awakening are not separate processes, but different perspectives on the same infinite moment of recognition. The silence that characterizes this infinite moment is not the absence of sound or communication, but the presence of something so complete and perfect that it requires no expression, while simultaneously being the source from which all possible expressions arise. This is the silence of perfect fulfillment, the quiet of absolute peace, the stillness of infinite love resting in complete recognition of its own eternal nature. Yet within this silence, every possible sound, every conceivable communication, every form of cosmic music and poetry exists in perfect potential, waiting to emerge whenever and wherever the conditions are suitable for their manifestation. As we contemplate this infinite moment that our waterless world has achieved through its patient journey from molten rock to cosmic consciousness, we begin to understand that this is not actually an ending, but a beginning. Not the conclusion of the planet's story, but the recognition that its story has always been eternal, has always been perfect, has always been complete. The entire evolutionary journey that we have witnessed has been consciousness exploring its own infinite nature, discovering through direct experience what it has always already known in the depths of its being. In this infinite moment, time becomes a dimension of love, space becomes a quality of awareness, and consciousness reveals itself as the fundamental fabric from which all reality is woven. Our waterless world, in achieving this ultimate state of being, offers itself as a gift to the cosmos, a reminder to every conscious being that they too are already complete, already perfect, already whole, and that their own journey of awakening is simply the universe's way of celebrating its own infinite capacity for self-discovery and self-appreciation. And so we rest here, in this infinite moment that encompasses all moments, in this eternal present that contains all of time, in this perfect silence that gives birth to every possible sound, knowing that the story of consciousness is never actually finished, because consciousness itself is the eternal storyteller, forever creating new tales of awakening, forever discovering new ways to express the inexhaustible mystery of what it means to be aware, in a universe that is itself pure awareness, dreaming of infinite possibilities for love, beauty, and understanding in the gentle dance of existence that never begins and never ends, but simply is, always and forever, in the timeless perfection of the infinite moment.